Okay, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. We only have a couple of agenda items, but they're long ones. Do you want us to just jump into the SPC bylaw stuff, or did you want to talk about town meeting first? What would you like to do,
Town
Scott?
meeting and put it in context there, and then it won't take long. And then we can switch to those two articles, right? That are.
That's perfect. And before you start, I'm just remembering I forgot to tell Amanda to say that she's participating remotely. So maybe we could get Amanda to do that.
Amanda Hall, participating remotely.
Now we can circle back in.
Okay. Awesome.
Actually, I may have to do the same thing because I think the school building bylaw committee is technically in session as well. So I'll say Sarah Lemke participating remotely for the school building bylaw committee.
Thanks, Sarah.
Well, hello. So good evening. Honored to be here as always with the Warrant Committee and with the SPC Bylaw Review Committee. I was thinking today I was feeling a little bit of pride of parenthood as the appointing authority of both the Warrant Committee and of the school building. It's not quite being a mom or dad, but you know, an important figure in the lives of these two bodies. So I'm here mostly tonight to talk about coming attractions for next Monday. We have a very modest and manageable agenda, I think. And so I'll talk a little bit about how I intend to kind of go through that. So that's what I see in my guidance and my rulings for that. Before I do that, I just wanted to, really express my appreciation to the Warrant Committee for the work it has undertaken. We're already into another year for this year's warrant and budget. But since this is really the first time I've seen the committee since the fall, I want to thank you again on behalf of the town for all of what you did in 2021. It was a very challenging year for us, but the Warrant Committee really stepped up. Excellent, diligent, thoughtful, collaborative, business-like. So it was extraordinary effort for the town and during a challenging year. So I really appreciate that. And I wanted to acknowledge and particularly thank Sharon tonight. A special waiver of appreciation and respect for the leadership of last year and over the last 3 years and your service over these number of years. So really tremendous. And so that's hopefully on behalf of the town, to the extent I have that authority to be able to express that. Certainly on my own behalf, though, I really appreciate that. And so thank you for that. And Sharon will be chairing for the, thank you. We'll be chairing through the Warrant Committee through the town meeting, and we'll be passing the gavel to Jeremy. And we have a peaceful transfer of power here. In fact, the gavel is only figurative. You heard me talk about that at town meeting. We don't actually use a gavel so far in town. At least I don't at town meeting, and I don't think Jeremy has one. So, but he will be the next chair, and happily, Sharon will continue on the Warrant Committee. The town will continue to benefit from her expertise and experience and knowledge around the budget and other things. And so thanks, and also to all the rest, and welcome to Matt, that we came up in the elevator together. So we're going to throw him right into the fire here. And then I also want to, while handing out kudos, express my really sincere appreciation for the SPC Bylaw Review Committee. So this group that is behind me in part, but obviously Sarah and Cynthia and Russ and Carolyn, Bob and Tom, who are not here. Sarah is with us here. So, I mean, I really have to say, when I was thinking about what I would say, there was, this is a group who really answered the call to undertake, a challenging and somewhat kind of a complex kind of a task, but to do it in a compressed time frame. And when I set about to make these appointments, I actually thought very carefully about this. I met a lot of people. I talked to a lot of individuals, and it was very, very important to me. I needed a group to appoint who would bring not only their talent and their experience and their insights in this compressed process of drafting a bylaw amendment, but really what I really felt like I needed to bring together was a group of individuals who had credibility. And that's because in establishing trust, I actually think the credibility is right at the core of that. It's in the trust equation numerator. Credibility and the reliability instantly, by virtue of the background and the talents and the experiences and what this group has done for the town over time, I think that they brought that credibility. The other thing they brought that is really important in trust is, you know, if credibility is part of the numerator, the denominator is self-orientation, you know, and so with a lower self-orientation, you can be more trusted. In this particular group set about to do their work in a kind of in a business-like fashion. And I wanted to establish this trust partially because, you know, big picture, you know, going back and just a little bit in the context of 2021, you know, it's, what was it? Vince Lombardi said, you know, you get knocked down in life is, you know, kind of part of it, but it's all about getting back up. And that's the test of character of an individual. I think we all know that because life has knocked us all down once or twice. And it's really about, but it's also about the character of a community. And that's what I think this year, 2022, you know, is about our capacity to be able to demonstrate that. And so starting that off really with this process again of beginning with the bylaw, you know, was real important for me to, you know, to find people who understood that, you know, that was really the kind of the thing, you know, establishing trust as a community, and then, you know, going forward, getting up, you know, looking to the future and addressing what we need to address. So. Plus, I also believe there's a reason why they make the windshield bigger than the rearview mirror, right? So here we go, and you know, we're on to these issues. So that's it. So thank you guys for all of your work and really extraordinary time commitments across the fall and then this spring. A very orderly process from what I was able to, you know, to pay attention to, which is one of the ironies of the new world is, you know, you can actually, I'm closer to the Warrant Committee deliberations than I ever was, you know, in the historical past when I would go back in time when it was just a meeting and, you know, I can walk around town and listen to the tape. So it's been, that's been very helpful. And the same thing goes to the school building committee. So let's talk about the town meeting on Monday night. So as you know, including the free cash article, there are 22 articles. And so here's what I intend to do. We're not going to have a consent calendar, but what we are going to do is we are going to take articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 13. I'll tell you what those articles are, and some of you will be responsible for giving the report, the motion, making the motion with the report. So 1 is the annual town reports. Sharon, I guess you will be making the motion on that. Number 2 is perpetual trust funds. And Mather, you'll be making the motion and providing the very brief report on that. Number 3 is to set the expenditure limits on our revolving funds. And I have Steve who will be making that motion and providing that report. Number 4 is the public educational governmental access and cable related funds transfer that we do. And Jillian will be making that motion and that report. These are all, we are recommending passage in all these, so it will be a positive motion being made by the Warrant Committee in all of these. Number 5 is the salary and compensation of elected town officers, and Amanda will make that motion and report. I get to make my usual joke about the town getting what it pays for or whatever, so something, I'll come up with something clever this year. And number 6 is the personal administration plan. And Jeremy, you're going to be providing that motion and a report. And if anybody from the personnel board, Christine, I think we determined that we don't need actually.
No, I think Jeremy's gonna speak.
Yeah, okay, so you make that. Okay. Number 8 is just the transfer of the money. Ed, you're going to be making the motion on that. That's had to do with the reimbursements for the Dale Street feasibility study. And number 13 is to pay the prior year tax bill. We need a 4/5 vote for that, and Steve will be making that motion and providing that report. So we will knock off those 8 articles, hopefully in a matter of minutes, you know, at the start of the meeting. And then my thinking would be that we would then put into the lottery the following articles. Article 7 will be in the lottery by itself. That's the operating budget. So when that is called, Sharon, I'll do we'll do the read and the holds. You'll kind of make the motion and make sure I include everything. And when we get to the end of it, that we do the final motion that actually approves it if there's any changes. But So that would be the operating budget on a read and hold basis, and Sharon will be making the motion and the reports. And then 9, 10, 11, and 12, which are the ones that are all sponsored by capital budget or have to do with capital stabilization fund matters. I'm going to link them all together, so we'll do them all at the same time. So Ed, you have number 9, which is the municipal building capitalization fund. That takes a 2/3 vote. And then Sharon, you would have 10 and 11 having to do with the transfer, and then Bob, you have 12, which is the water enterprise fund, and this transfer of sewer enterprise fund. So again, I think it makes sense to do those 4 together whenever they are called, which brings me to, I'm going to skip over Articles 14 and 20, which we're here to talk about tonight, but to go to Article 15, which is the article in which Ed will provide the motion and the report having to do with the change of the name of the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board. So that will be pulled by lottery. Numbers 16 and 17 will be pulled by lottery, but linked together. Those are the land use planning, our planning board. Issues having to do with the table of use regulations and the zoning bylaws, the zoning map. And I have Christine on both of those. And in terms of making the motion, the report, and they both require a 2/3 vote. And then standing individually in the lottery will be 18, which is the school building committee paying the cost of the feasibility study. I have Jillian as making that motion and providing the report on that. Number 19, Amanda will address this is the transfer of funds for the open space and recreation plan. And number 21 will be the replacement of a portion of the roof, and Sharon. So that will be, if we do those, they'll come up by lottery. We'll do them as they come up. As I said, we'll link the ones having to do with the capitalization budget. We'll link the ones having to do with the zoning. And I think that what my guidance is going to be is that we would try to do all of those. To me, honestly, that's not a heavy lift in terms of being able to get that, unless I'm missing something that I have in the past. Missed a couple of things where there was actually, but I think it's pretty straightforward, which would allow us then to leave the topic of tonight's meeting to be discussed and debated and deliberated if necessary, with knowing that we have whatever time we have left for the meeting to be able to do it. So I'm going to hold Articles 14 and 20 until after we've gone through the what I'm calling the regular town business and the ones that I just described by lottery, and then we will have that discussion. That's obviously coming into tonight's discussion, knowing what I know about the situation as it is. But I think we don't want to be in a situation where we have a protracted discussion, which I think may be merited. It's fine for the time to have, but to have it while there are still other agenda items out there that we could lose our quorum or certainly lose the interest, of folks. So I'd rather move through our business and then get to those. So that's kind of how I'm thinking of the meeting as unfolding. Questions? Any questions about the meeting? Thoughts? Other than that,
Makes sense.
that's all good. So I'll leave us to talk about it. Article 14 and 20, right? Is that
Yes, we'll do 14 and 20. To clarify, I thought that the hospital committee was coming in at 8 and then giving us a half-an-hour presentation. In light of our agenda, they're going to come in after their meeting and just chat with us rather than us having to fit in something at a very specific time. So in the interest of that,
My question on the just watching the select board meeting or select meeting, they brought up the issue of the question on Article 14 that they were going to vote after the school committee voted.
no, that was not Article 14. That was the 8 for 18.
Yeah.
Oh,
They haven't
okay.
voted on 18 yet, because I think the school committee is meeting on Friday. Is that right, Jess?
Yep. And it is not a resistance.
It's just a formality. Gus, we voted,
Right, I just wanted. to
but our
clarify what-
caveat of our vote was we assumed that the school committee and the select board were gonna ask for it. The select board did not feel comfortable making that assumption and wanted, so are they just gonna meet right before town meeting? Is that what the select board, we're good, right, but like if you're meeting on Friday, the select board's gonna take their vote on that probably right before town meeting.
Right, so we'll meet at, we put the agenda out today, that we'll meet at 9 o'clock, we'll discuss it, we'll vote or not vote
Mhm.
on it, and then, given the outcome of that.
The select board
The
will take it up
select
at
board
their
will take
meeting
it up.
on Monday prior to the town meeting. Yes,
Christine, by that statement, that everybody is scheduled for 6, does that include our board? Okay.
No, sorry.
No, we're just gonna be
I meant-
totally trying to figure out.
I think it's usually-
space for them.
usually the school committee, the warrant committee and the select board all get separate sections of the library.
Yeah, I meant the usual stuff.
Like a
If you
Sharks
needed
and Jets
if you needed a
fans.
meeting, you should post it and arrange it for a location. The pre-town meetings are subject to open meeting. It has to be posted properly.
Christine, depending on what we had this conversation tonight, we may do that.
I believe Brittany's already posted.
She did those things.
Wow.
On Monday night,
For Monday at 6. For no location.
library.
They're usually all in the library.
We'll find you.
Grab a table.
Right.
Oh, grab a table. Okay, so, okay, so I guess, so I think we'll talk about 14. And it does eventually mix with 20. And I just want to preface this with, I think you guys all did a great job and you spent so much time on this committee and you're all super, like, I just remember sitting in my kitchen, my husband reading me the list of who Scott had appointed and I'm like, well, that's the who's who of Medfield. So they're gonna do an awesome job. So anything that might come out of my mouth that might perceive to be negative, it is not negative towards any of you. I thoroughly agree in everything that the purpose of this, and I agree in a tremendous amount of the purposes of this. So just watching what Gus had said at the last 2 meetings, I'm probably going to repeat some things that Gus said, which is actually a little bit bizarre, but that's okay. And I do think that Gus is coming after his other meetings, so I don't want to put any words in his mouth because I'm sure he'll show up while we're still talking about it. So
No need either. No need either.
no, I think he's already said his opinions. And so I know that we all have questions. I do know that Steve had already put together some questions and emailed to you guys in advance. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe if we go through Steve's questions, that might answer most of everyone's questions.
Can I just give a quick overview?
Love to.
Before we do that, just, let me just say it. Had there been more time, we definitely would have come to your committee and talked before voting on the select.
Can I
board
ask you to-
school committee.
I forgot our owl chair rule for the
Sorry.
folks at home, if you don't mind.
Say my name,
Sure, yes,
Carolyn Casey.
okay. Thanks, Karen.
So I just want to say that, you know, we just wanted a short time window, but, you know, we would have come and talked with you before the vote. It just wasn't time to fit all 3 in. So just to give sort of an overview, I know a lot of people are thinking that we need a school building committee bylaw because of what we've just been through as a town. But honestly, I've been in town 30 years, and in the 90s, this was an issue, putting together a school building committee. So it's been a long time in terms of trying to figure out how to do this smoothly. And one of the things we started with is we wanted a committee that represented as many parts of the town as we could get, right? We want everyone to feel comfortable with the committee, have buy-in, have a voice in it as much as we could. And we wanted it to be able to function in a way that would be totally transparent and have people bringing different backgrounds into the discussion. And our first thought about how to do that was, instead of having one appointing authority, was to have 3. So we went with the school committee, the moderator, and the select board. And we wanted it to be fair and equal, so we gave each of them 4 members, which made a 12-member committee. All of those people would be able to vote. That's the voting part of the committee. We discussed bigger committees, we discussed smaller committees, and we ended up with 12. It seemed like a number that got us enough people on it to, again, hit that goal of many pieces of our community. So for the school committee piece, we had 2 school committee members. We didn't want their terms to be up at the same time because school building project often goes beyond 3 years. And then 2 additional members. It'd be great if they had some experience in education. Then we had the moderator appointing 4 members, and we thought it was important that we had a planning board member and a warrant committee member. We left it for up, like the warrant committee would choose who wanted to be on it, and the planning board would choose. We gave 1 to the moderator and 1 to the select board. Other than that, we were really trying to just say, use your judgment, bring in some people with expertise. I listened to the last 2 selectmen's meeting, and Gus has talked a lot about feeling like we were telling him who to choose. And that's actually not the wording. If you read it, it says to select people with pertinent experience and experience in pertinent areas. Then it says such as, which means, for example, so all we were doing is listing examples of what makes sense. Architect, somebody with construction, building, green energy. So there's a lot of leeway there in terms of choosing people who bring expertise. And if a school building project has something very special about it, and we didn't think in this year to list it, but in 2030 or whatever, then it's there, it's pertinent experience. So then you could add that person in. We had requests for people who were sent in emails and questions for us about somebody, a senior citizen. And I will tell you that we spent a long time trying to find, how do you find that? We first went with age 55, and then we got feedback that that's not really a senior citizen, so then we bumped that up. And I know many people have mentioned that it seems like ageism when you say someone over 65. And there might be a better way to sort of reach that niche of the community. But that was the point of that, was to try to bring in somebody in the community with that perspective. So that's where.
Carolyn, can I jump in on that one point? I think on that in particular, one of the concerns I think a number of us had was that the senior citizens in town feel that just because they don't have school-age children doesn't mean they don't participate in the economics of these decisions, and that often are sort of not represented by the people who are focused on, people who have school-age children. So it was a segment of the population we were afraid might not be reached by the other representatives who were more focused on having school-age children or having a vested interest or a current interest in the education system. So, I thought when I saw Stephen's questions that was really one of the important points, was to make sure that perspective was covered, because they are taxpayers, notwithstanding having theoretically not kids in the school right now.
Could I also add one?
Of course, definitely.
And the reason we picked 65, after going back and forth and all kinds of thought, that's the age that people typically retire, start retiring. And so we figured that was the group that we really wanted to hit, not necessarily just people without children in school, but the retired community and representing them. That's why we picked the number 65 in particular.
Yeah, I think we were focused on people whose incomes were going to start becoming fixed and, theoretically reduced, and therefore might have particular concerns about the cost of these projects.
I thoroughly get all of that. Is it okay to interrupt you, or do you?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any objections to just changing 65 to someone appointed by the Council on Aging?
So here's the hard part about tonight is that we will take any suggestions. I guess now we'll be meeting before town meeting. But I don't want to make decisions tonight. 'cause
No,
I
I'm not
don't
asking you to
do
make a
it.
decision. I'm just
Right.
asking your straight opinion and
Yeah.
and
So we
it can just be your
we-
opinion. I'm just,
We actually talked about
did you
that.
talk about that?
The problem is that not all residents who are 65 and older are connected to the Council on Aging. So there was that little piece of, would they be able to reach out to anybody, or would it just be reach out to those who are connecting with the Council on Aging, who are, participating in their programs and their information and that kind of thing. So again, it was trying to determine how do you reach out. Now,
Yeah.
I would assume that the moderator could call the Council on Aging, right, and say, we're gonna be looking for someone, please tell all your members,
Yeah.
right? But then at the same time, we want to reach all those members who aren't partaking of anything the Council on Aging does.
Actually, Carolyn, I think that's
Sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Go ahead. Sarah.
I was just going to say, I think that theme covers a lot of the discussions that we had, and it's just worth mentioning. There were a number of cases where we thought someone might be chosen by the appointing authority, but we didn't want to dictate that they had to be chosen that way. So I know there was also a question raised by Stephen and others about why we didn't include a member of the Permanent Building Committee. We absolutely are not suggesting that a Permanent Building Committee member shouldn't participate. We just weren't saying that you have to choose one. And we expect that some people will think there's value in appointing someone from the Permanent Building Committee, or that, the moderator would consult the Council on Aging. We just didn't make it a requirement in their choice. So I thought that actually gave more flexibility to the appointing authorities. I know Gus's take was a little different, but I think part of our idea was, of course, these people will consult all of the people in town with expertise in these issues in making their appointments, but we don't need to be quite so prescriptive in how they pick their appointment.
From my own perspective, again, I just echo what Sharon, said. When I saw the committee, and I've listened in on your meetings, and it really is a great group. So commend you for that. One of the things that comes through is in trying not to be specific, it seems to be very specific. And I hate to use that old word, but the camel is the horse developed by committee, right? And I think we get a little bit of that. Mark?
You come. Come sit in the chair.
So I apologize for anyone that's heard this rap before, but I gave it to the selectmen last night, but I think it's important in this discussion, particularly that you understand the context, which is that if you're going to, or even potentially going to work with MSBA, they have regulations. Their regulation requires that the town set up a specific project-specific school building committee. And they have a bunch of criteria for who serves or who should serve, which is pretty diverse. If you have a bylaw such as this in place already, they will consider whether that complies. And again, as an aside, what happened with the prior school project that failed last fall was that our permanent planning and building committee, several of the members who had experience with MSBA recognized up front that that committee was not going, in its composition, was not going to satisfy MSBA's requirements, and they therefore needed to set up a new building committee. So it was done on an ad hoc basis. So you can do it this way, that's fine. But ultimately, MSBA has a final say, which is why the saving language that I recommended in here, because they, for instance, recommend local select board members beyond that committee, and you had an exclusion initially, and so therefore the saving language, it says, but if in order to qualify for MSBA or something or other, that exclusion drops out. So they have the final say. They'll review your committee and determine how closely that satisfies their requirements. And if they feel the need to make their own determination, they will. They don't care so much how they get selected or whether they're voting or non-voting. They just care about the composition. And that's what's spelled out in the regulation.
So Mark, you've actually reviewed the current draft and would
Yes,
that change?
I
Is that change or is that
I had
going
I had multiple back and forths with representatives of the committee as they were working.
So as the draft stands now, you're comfortable that it would meet MSBA requirements?
That it's that the flexibility is there, that we're not going to get excluded.
Okay.
It also has to pass muster of the Attorney General's office as a regulation on its face. It seems to be okay as far as that goes.
Well, Mark, on the question of the 65 and older, if you're comfortable with that wording,
Yeah, usually the law is when you exclude somebody as opposed to a preference.
I'd like to comment on that though, and again, I echo what Sharon said in the beginning. We've done a tremendous amount of work in a very short period of time, and I think it's terrific. But I do have an issue with that over 65, or even if it was the Council on Aging. I think you're selecting one demographic to the exclusion of many other demographics in town, and I don't think that's correct. I think the purpose of the committee is to arrive at a building that makes sense for the community. And as you alluded to, you kind of thought that you want the over 65 to represent those people who are on a fixed income and have perhaps a cost means more to them. Well, cost can mean just as much and more to someone 20 to 30 as over 65. I mean, if you're going to start to select a particular demographic, I think you have to select a whole bunch. I think you can't. You can't do that, and I know you can't do that. It doesn't make sense. So I would.
If I could just justify that on behalf of the committee, and that is the other significance is that's a significant voting block, and we've had a history in this town. In fact, it's not hypothetical, where that voting block basically vetoed a school project that had passed town meeting, because they felt that their needs were not being met. So to have a representative as part of the process makes a lot of sense, because they're voting people, and this will ultimately have to clear town meeting, perhaps on multiple occasions, and certainly ultimately for the borrowing authority.
But isn't that what the public hearings are for? For everyone to express their opinion? I mean, that's why we have multiple, now we'll have multiple, certainly for site location and multiple others. If there's public hearings and there's minutes to every meeting, then there'll be ample opportunity, I would think, for all groups, everybody.
There is, when you have public hearings, you do get more voices, and we really want it to be as open and as can be and get input. But there's a difference for someone who's on the committee and who's there every week, and then being part of the process and understanding the decisions that were made and sharing that with their peers, than just being in a public meeting and speaking.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, what you're saying is one group is more important than the other. Because if the over 65 is a voting block, then there are probably other blocks as well. I mean,
It's one in particular,
which one is more important than the other.
It's a fact of life, the way municipal government is set up right now, that you have the town meeting, and almost always you're going to have the debt exclusion override vote. And they have a significant role to play, and they've got to be on board. And this is a mechanism, and I'm just saying this is a sound basis to my way of thinking, not just legally and theoretically, but practically, knowing what happened here. It's again the $60 million for 3 schools, a project overwhelmingly passed town meeting, and then it failed at the ballot. So. And they had to go back to the drawing board.
So the question I have is, and it's really just kind of a conversation, okay? That as you proceed and look for the, so the wisdom of the 3 different groups of making a selection, the moderator, the select board, and the school committee, and the explanation of the school building committee being put together in a more in a quicker manner in the past, in that experience there. This is to preclude that, right? This is to preclude it just being a, oh my goodness, we gotta get this in conformity with MSBA and other things. I think the question that came up in the select meeting, and I think I'm just surprised that Sharon, I agree with more than I thought I would, that I had in the past, certainly, is the judgment of the selection, whether it's the moderator, whether it's the select board, whether it's the school committee, is to make sure that all those constituencies are considered without making it the legal restriction. And I would say, on the other hand, I was very much troubled by the fact that that there's an election to include, or there's an opportunity to include the permanent building committee, because I see that when you talk about being divisive, that to me seems like we're separating school and town at a very much at a time we don't want to. And, you know, from my experience with the last school project, the FAF Center and all that, that got thrown in somewhat, you know, people saying, you know, it just came in last minute, including the strategy that the permanent building committee is supposed to provide, or does provide actually, in terms of town-wide, might preclude that. So that's, again, it's a discussion, it's not an
Yeah,
argument.
so I want to say again, I know Sarah just said it, but we were assuming that some of the appointing authorities would be asking people on the permanent building committee, and one of their members, or maybe two, would want to be part of this. We also were mindful, though, that you could possibly have two projects going on in town at the same time. You could have a school and you could have something else. And there's a lot of meetings that go into these committees, and maybe one person doesn't have time to do both, right? So we thought that is a discussion that when you're looking for a school building, you go to the permanent building committee, you say, is there someone here who, you know, wants to be part of it? And also, we're not seeing this committee as working, you know, in their own little bubble, right? They should be going to the select people at the school committee, the permanent building committee. They should be getting their information. Like, they're made up of different people, and their focus is on school, but they should be doing all the legwork you do in order to make sure everybody in the town, they have the information they need and they're all a part of it. That's what's going to make a committee successful, right? If you just say, we're going to not talk to the permanent building committee, or we're not going to talk to the finance people, and you know it's going to fail.
I think in fairness, you know, all the boards were spoken to in the last, and I think the bylaw issue that's being addressed here is to get them into that committee. So they're not in a bubble as such,
right?
But they are in a participatory, accountable group.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I make that decision.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. The other piece is that we had at least 3 members, just not voting members. And we were clear about saying, if you're an employee, then you're not voting, because we just feel like that's a conflict with taxes and how you get paid. And many people have mentioned that in, the use of a complaint, but that many people mentioned that they're uncomfortable when employees are voting on this committee. So the superintendent, a principal, maybe more than one, depending on projects, right? The town administrator, and any designee that those people want to have would be part of the school building committee, but they would be non-voting. And I want to be clear, they're in every discussion. They advocate, argue, whatever they want, bring in their papers, their people, whatever. But when it comes to voting moments, then they are non-voting.
Ross, did you want to say something? Oh, you're all set.
Should be turning on a second. What am I forgetting?
You must have covered what he was.
I can see Sarah.
Did you guys discuss, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about what if the next school is a combined use building with park and rec? Like, how would that fit into this? Because
well, that's why we figured that seemed to be where we're going, and definitely the appointing authorities would be choosing people from the permanent building committee. And there might be 3 members from the permanent building committee. You know what I mean? Like, if that's what you saw, it wasn't just for schools. If you think it's going to be something else, you would be trying to dovetail that as much as
Mhm.
possible.
Now Russ wants to.
Well, I don't think we've really addressed the mechanism of what would happen if that situation happened. No,
The Alice wants to see it.
sorry, and actually, late introduction was Allison. 11 West Street Road. So we thought about it in the context of personnel being overtaxed, maybe on having to serve on 2 committees with all kinds of things going on. We hadn't really addressed, I think, the mechanism of what would happen with the 2 boards, Permanent Building Committee and School Building Committee. But as you say that, I guess I would have to assume or think that the 2 committees would have to have more interaction with each other throughout the process. If a particular building was going to, sort of house 2 different, entities, a municipal entity and then the school, it would seem to me that they would have to interact in order to build a building together.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a strategic role of the permanent building committee is to prioritize.
Yes.
And the reality is that the Dale project has been pushed off by the municipal building, by the work that was done in for the police and fire. So it has been pushed off, and it was part of that. I think it's important. I know that this isn't done in a vacuum, obviously, and the town administrators involved, and the select board's involved. Again, I'm saying if we're trying to, specify what that structure is, I think acknowledging that role, that interrelationship, it can't possibly not be separate.
No,
But the idea is, and MSBA requires a different board. You can't have the permanent building committee be responsible for your school building's construction.
Sure.
Now, it does.
Well, and a combined building wouldn't get done by the MSBA, I don't think.
Yeah, I didn't follow that one through.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
So that's why you have to have 2. See, we started also with 2 separate bylaws. We thought rather than try to modify the permanent building committee bylaw, it would be easier. And we went through the whole down the road and we were ready to sign off on it. And I forget how it happened, but we just turned around and we said, you know what? Let's edit the permanent building bylaw. Because I think one of the reasons was, even with 2 separate bylaws, we were still going to have to make some technical edits to the permanent building committee on taking things out. So rather than doing it that way, we decided to do it. But clearly we need 2 different bylaw
sections
for the, for whether it's municipal or thing.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to rewrite this at all. I think you guys did a great job. I'm
No,
just trying
we
to
understand. We understand.
and what contributed to it. And I know you've covered it all.
And
so
the
I'm not
reason
trying
we're
to-
here tonight is because we didn't have time, as Carolyn said, to do vetting with the other boards in town.
Yeah.
And whoever else might have been involved, interested, I don't know who that
And
would
we
be.
did get some emails, we got people giving some feedback and we read it all many times and tried to incorporate it, but yeah, it was a tight schedule.
I know, you were really
go-
tight.
And we were going fast with it.
Part of
so,
us said,
Yeah.
maybe we should just wait till a special town meeting.
Yeah.
Do we really
I might have
have
had
enough
that
time?
thought.
But we
Well,
decided that,
yeah.
no, let's
So what
do our
happened?
best, and we think we.
What happens if you don't go forward at town meeting? What, does it delay anything?
Well,
I would say that, given that,
Well,
The
can you
vote
still move forward with the
well, given
MFA
given
process?
that both the school committee and the select board has voted to submit an SOI, that we will hear back from the MSBA in December. Seems to me delaying this only delays the composition of this committee and the work that they might do before we hear back from that MSBA. The MSBA does consider actions like this, forming a school building committee, appointing the members, they consider that when they make a decision. So the more this committee can get together and start to work, I think that's a good thing. And delaying that probably doesn't help.
Well, and so I guess part of me is like, if we're gonna have a special town meeting in a month.
Right.
We're only delaying it a month.
5 weeks.
Yeah, you're into the summer.
But is that a
and
given
then,
that's gonna happen?
right,
Not necessarily.
yeah.
I guess my question, I totally get that, and we did talk about, you know, are we going too fast, you know, and should we wait for the June? I guess tonight I'd want to hear, like, what significantly would you, how significantly would you see it different to delay it? You know, that's
Right.
substantial there to delay.
I have some personal suggestions of what I would change that I think that would not need to be delayed, because I think that some of the suggestions I would make, I don't think really change it substantively. So I'm happy to tell you what my ideas are, and
Yeah,
people can shoot me
maybe
down
the
or not if
point
you
to
want,
sort
but.
of hear what those are.
So one of my thoughts was that I know that you did 12, and I totally hear what you're saying, that the select board or the moderator, like somebody could pick someone on the permanent planning building committee. I do feel strongly that if we're gonna be specific in here about who's gonna get picked, I do think that one should get added. So I actually would kind of argue to make it be 13, then you've got an odd number. Have the board of selectmen do 5 and have one of them be someone on the permanent planning and building committee. And then I would change, I do really have an ageism issue with 65, so but I thoroughly understand where you were going. So I could live with someone selected by the Board of the Council on Aging, something like that makes your point. Because, you know, part of me is like, what if the absolute best person is 64? Are you not going to take them? You know, like,
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
you know, and it's like,
We'll push their birthday up.
well, that's the whole thing. It's like, you know, you're going to ask somebody to submit their birth certificate with it, and they're going to be like, well,
70.
yeah. I mean, so I don't know how else you say what you want to say without like putting an age in there. That's why I'm tossing the council on aging thing in there. Just,
I
yeah.
just have a quick,
Yeah.
easy idea around this. that
Yeah.
the town moderator takes into account, and the selectmen take into account all
Demographics. Yeah.
You know, that is actually written within the bylaw instead of specifically, because at some point there I don't see this happening, but there may be a significantly larger population of, you know, young families or families in high school or not even families, but single people. I mean, all these things.
Kind of like what Scott does for our committee without having a bylaw that says that he does what he does.
But you just simply write it in as, you know, looking at
Yeah.
and considering. That way we're leaving it to the best judgment of the person that we have elected to be moderator. And I think that's kind of an important part of people choosing and electing. is that they're choosing and electing the judgment. So that's kind of one thing.
I would suggest the term that you're using, consider all demographics, doesn't make it.
Okay.
Because that's totally undefinable.
Agreed.
How are you gonna say that, you know, the moderator has decided, has looked at all, and is he appointing somebody from this particular demographic? Is he saying that? I wouldn't think that.
I think I'd agree with what you're saying, Jess. I guess it's certainly better than what we have. I guess I could pass on that one, but I kind of lost my thought this time. I'm still a little.
I have a couple
concerned
more, yeah.
About having, you know, again, the purpose of the committee is to come up with a building that makes sense, and cost isn't the only element. I know it's a big part of it, but you just can't choose a demographic that you know is bent in one direction.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. So I would.
I was presume, by the way, that people over 65 are opposed to a school.
No,
building.
right.
We have to.
Right, but I think that's kind of what I heard.
Right, with the fixed income comment. That's kind of-
Well, or at least
That's the voting block.
I don't know whether the Warrant Committee had the benefit of reviewing the Mass School Building Authority regulation. I know that the committee did. But what you do is you submit the proposed school building committee to them for their review.
Right.
And they review and approve it. And the criteria, among the criteria that they review is and this I'm quoting, the extent to which there is representation of the municipal government, school district personnel with management, educational, and maintenance expertise, representation of members of the local community with design and construction experience. So they're looking for specific things there. And no matter what you do at the local level, you need to ensure that you're addressing those things, or no matter what you do, you risk them rejecting your committee and telling you to go form a new committee.
Yeah, agreed. And so I'll just run through my last couple ones. How's that? So I increased the Board of Selectmen to 5 because I added 1 from the Permanent Planning and Building Committee. And then where it says that the 3 appointments will be residents with expertise in certain areas such as, I noticed that language was almost taken word from the top. And so one thing I noticed that in Article B, where you pulled that language, it actually says should endeavor to. And so I would just suggest that instead of it saying will be, would put the should endeavor to, which is what was up top.
Right.
And then that just gives, I think that really where Gus was going, and again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but at least what I was interpreting is that the will be makes it seem more obsolete than the such as. So maybe if you took the should endeavor to, which was in the first one, and just made this mirror that exactly.
Where's the should?
So if you go Article B, or I guess C, I'm sorry. C at the top, it says among the members, the Board of Selectmen should endeavor to appoint. So if you just, and then you took all the rest of that sentence, if it just says 3 appointments should endeavor to be residents with expertise, it just uses the same exact sentence as what's up top.
Parallel.
Yeah, just make it be parallel. And then I feel like that gives, it takes that will be out, that makes it feels like it has a little bit more to that. And then if you change it to 13, you have to fuss with some of the numbers below. But, and I guess I have a question, because I did, and I don't think we talked about it yet. I'm curious why you specifically didn't want someone from the Board of Selectmen on it.
Well,
I have that question too, Jessica.
Okay, thank you.
So in trying to make as many people in the community take part, right? The Board of Selectmen already have a huge input in the community, right? They have their meetings, they can call the school building committee to come give updates. At town meeting, they can talk pro or con. And to me, what we were trying to do was draw in more people. It doesn't seem like it's something they need to be on, because they can talk about it, they can take reports from it, they can have presentations on it. And at town meeting,
And they're required to.
Well,
sign- they're
in
required
the
to
end, they
sign
have to
all
vote
the
on it,
they
right?
have
Yeah.
a sign, and there's so many things
Yeah.
to do.
They have
Okay.
to sign all
So
the
to
submissions.
take a spot where we could maybe pull in someone else from the community and get them involved just made more sense.
Gotcha. And so then my other one, which is what I'm assuming Jess is raising her hands about, why do you have the town of Medfield paying for them to have a clerk?
Or the town of Medfield paying, no.
The school department budget paying for them,
And the school.
because no
department
other
pays
committee
for
in
something within
town
the
other than the Board of
feasibility
Selectmen have
So
somebody.
we were gonna have the town do it, but then we got
No,
into.
the feasibility study should include all, like, the school building committee is substantially separate from the school committee. And that needs to be very much clear throughout this entire thing, because I think that that's something that was confused very frequently.
I think the easy answer was, we didn't know who to charge in the town.
So let's do.
Somebody might have said no.
The town said no.
Yeah, you know,
He doesn't have a vote.
That's what I suspected.
He doesn't have a vote,
We don't get a clerk, what,
Well, yeah, so that was the easy.
we have to take
Yeah, no,
turns.
that's fine. I just want to make sure it doesn't get put into law, because it's simply not the purview of the school committee or the school department. You should not have a budget line to be And that's something we just have to make sure of, because otherwise we would just have to go back.
And
and-
the reality is those tasks are usually done by the OPM and design.
Right. The
Yeah.
OPM
And the cost of the
designer.
OPM
Well, we
and designer
heard, we did
are
hear
appropriated.
that usually that's the case, but what if? And when does that
You'll
start?
always have an OPM.
There's always gonna be an
Yeah,
OPM.
what if the OPM wasn't being
Yeah.
responsible and.
Well, then
There might be like a short period of time when committees formed and when
But it-
they
this
have
is part of
an
it.
OPM where they have to do it themselves, but it's a very short.
It was
period of time.
really important, I just want to say one thing is really important to us, is that there are minutes that are always taken, put in the same spot where anybody can find them.
Yeah.
And that they're very thoroughly done, right? So that anyone who doesn't watch the meeting can understand what's going on, including all appropriate documents attached, so that.
I'd like to toot our own horn that we did that without a
Yes,
clerk.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I know too, it's hard to be at a meeting and give input and be the one taking notes.
That's
It's
right.
hard, right?
Okay, so, and so.
Yeah.
the
Except for
other-
Jill, who can do it
Jill, we can
simultaneously.
do it both, I guess.
But with
But-
recordings now, you can
Yeah.
just go back over stuff.
Well, that is true,
Right.
but we were just trying to be really clear about, we want this process to be as open and as much information as possible out to everybody.
So maybe keep that in, but the responsibility of that.
Who pays for it, I don't think should be
Yeah,
there.
well, we got a no from somebody, and then we were just trying to find someone who might have money, not. that we had money, but we're all-
Close, no minutes.
It's 95%
They do actually
of it's covered.
Yeah.
Feasibility cost.
Yes,
You
I
shouldn't
knew
worry about
it would be covered in the feasibility, but we had this piece between feasibility and then meeting and making sure.
Yeah.
And Sarah actually had her hand up. Sarah, do you want to say something?
I was just gonna say, part of our perspective was that there are town boards that have minutes taken and recordings done by a clerk, a non-member clerk, but I think it's actually boards rather than committees.
Isn't
Like
it only
planning board and
selectmen?
zoning board share a clerk. I think the Board of Selectmen have a clerk. So some of it was thinking that there are precedents in town for the town providing.
Everybody's.
See, this is.
Go ahead, Jess.
It's not gonna end well for me.
It's not gonna end.
So first of all, I do want to say to the people on the committee, I know I'm sitting here in the back row and you can hardly see me. I know that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and I think sometimes being on a committee feels like every single road is to hell. So I understand that this is a really difficult place to be in, and I truly appreciate you trying to take on this nugget. The one other thing I would ask is that if we are going to put within a bylaw where meeting minutes and recordings should be available, given that this is always will be, and we are trying to work very hard on marrying this process as a school and town process, that if we put it in the bylaw, we need to have those meeting minutes both on the town website easily available and the school website easily available, so that they're essentially the same website being able to be posted in both places to a single place. So if we put it on there, let's make sure that it's on the town website as well. So that's procedural requirements, section 2, and then letter C, where it says, I'm still.
You would have it say school department and town webpage. You would
Yes.
add that, you would
And
add
then
that. I mean, it's already done anyway.
Which is exactly, but if we're going to put it.
If we're gonna be
if we're
specific.
codifying it, we need to codify it right.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that that goes in. And I don't know, and this is actually a question I have for Mark. Given that the AG and the Secretary of State also have to look at this, is the 65 delineation something that would flag this as not being, as not complying with kind of equal opportunity or any of the kind of discriminatory, like, because there's one single age bracket that is put in and identified, and yet no other protected category is identified within the thing. And that is simply just a question I have, because I know the things that we struggle with as a committee And the amount of rigor that the AG as well as the DESI put in to protected categories and what we can ask for.
As I said earlier, it would be, what would flag it would be a preclusion, not an inclusion.
Okay.
So.
That was the end of my list.
Where did we sort of end up on the suggestion for who pays for the clerk? No,
I would just strike it. I would just strike, I would strike the part that is in parentheses that says specifically who pays for it. I would strike it.
And the committee assumes the responsibility to provide minutes, so.
And it is a requirement of the open meeting law.
Which we put in,
So-
and follow the open meeting requirement, and then we add the cards.
Didn't we have that the clerk would be appointed by the town administrator?
Appointed by the town, but then funded by the school
Okay.
department's budget.
So
that
which is
stays in.
not-
So the permanent planning and building committee is kind of multifunctional. It was intended for that purpose. It has a strategic purpose, a proactive purpose. And then it becomes more responsive if there's a particular project undertaken and going forward. It remains to be seen if that's what would happen with the school building committee or not, but that in the context of minutes has more or less importance. If it's the planning and conceptual stuff, if you put that committee in place and activated it now, and they were actively involved in the planning stages, then the fact that they took accurate minutes and they were available is more critical. As the process proceeds, it becomes more narrow, technical, and somebody else as part of the construction management takes over that responsibility anyway. The meetings of the committee, actually, if you want the road paved to hell, you're just going to the deeper into the circles as these projects proceed actually to construction. So the meeting, I don't know if any of you have been involved in building project, public building construction before, but the meetings are at a very, very technical level. And that if somebody with the OPM, with your clerk, that's gonna have prepared the minutes, and in fact, most of the meeting will be comparing what took place at the prior meeting, determining what's taking place in the interim, whether it's satisfactory or not, and then going forward so that you have a evolving action plan, if you will, until the project's complete. It's very technical, detailed, and it's a specialist as part of your construction team that's going to be generating that.
Yeah.
So the fact of the bylaw, who takes minutes or not, it becomes less and less important as the project actually gets underway.
Yes, so I think to that point, I think I would make it just say the town of Medfield shall provide a clerk if necessary, because if you've got an OPM, you don't need that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
And
and
then,
likely that clerk,
if I can just bang a drum and then
that
take the
OPM is
funded
funded.
part.
Yeah, well, that-
capital
I already took that
budget,
part.
not the school department.
Well, yeah, so I would delete that whole, so basically right now it says the town of Medfield shall provide a clerk, and then in parentheses, it says school department's paying for it. I would delete the parentheses, and I would just say after clerk, I would just put if necessary. Because if an OPM is doing it, there's no point in having a paid employee do it.
And likely that's funded by a capital appropriation, not the school department
Right.
budget.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
And there will be times when this committee meets before, like when you're selecting an OPM, you don't have that on board yet. And meeting minutes will be needed
Yes.
during
Mhm.
that time frame, which the
And if they're a
committee would be
declared
responsible
school
for.
committee meeting, then, you know,
Yeah,
we would have our
absolutely.
subcommittee minutes as well as you guys, whatever, but that's.
and Christine loves to show up to be the clerk too.
She can't take multiple positions.
Oh.
They're not offering to pay me.
Yeah, that was just mine. Well,
Too funny. I guess I'll just ask your opinion because I know that Gus talked about this last night and I was waiting till he got here to ask your opinion because he probably wants to hear it, but he was talking a lot about the language that quantifies the current planning board member
Oh, yes,
piece.
I'm gonna ask Sarah, can you flag Sarah to explain it, 'cause Sarah, can you explain the part?
The extra description after, because like in one theory,
Organization.
yeah, the whole, in theory, it could just end, the one point will be a current planning board member, but then you have that whole rest of the
Yes.
sentence. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so when we were reviewing some of the feedback that we received via email, By the way, I should say, I think someone referenced it, but you know, sitting on the planning board, which also has very low public participation, this committee had very low public participation. So we made ourselves available, we put notices out, and very few people came. But we did receive some feedback via email, which was great. So from, I would say, the sort of limited amount of feedback that we got, a number of people commented that they wanted the interests of the townwide master plan to be considered, and that people felt like the townwide master plan needed to have a role in school building siting decisions particularly, but in school building projects. So that was what drove the idea of including a member of the planning board. It wasn't so much that the planning board has expertise in school building siting projects. It was someone needs to represent the interests of the townwide master plan. The planning board is responsible for executing the townwide master plan vision. So let's have the planning board be that party, but we wanted to specifically tie the planning board's role back to being the shepherd of the townwide master plan.
Can I just, I don't know, Sarah, can you hear me? Sarah, can you explain with the words without limitations? Because that's what Gus said he did not understand in the sentence. It says interest without limitations.
Well, I mean, the planning board also has expertise in things like siting of buildings and protecting natural resources, traffic considerations. I mean, when the planning board completes a review of a project, we go through an extensive analysis of whether, you know, what the impacts to neighboring properties might be, how it fits into the rest of the roadway, pedestrian, open space network within town. So there may be things that the planning board representative might have opinions or expertise on that aren't specifically covered by the townwide master plan. So I think that was the idea behind the including without limitation. That being said, I don't feel the need to die on our sword over including without limitation. But I think that was the idea, is the planning board could have a representative who would have a voting voice and can address all the topics, but at a minimum, that person should be advocating for what's in the townwide master plan.
So you wouldn't be opposed to a more abbreviated sentence there?
No, no, I think as a committee, as someone mentioned at the beginning, it's hard for us to really be responding to points without the full committee here. But personally, and as a member of the planning board, I don't think it's a huge deal.
I know Gus sent me a few suggestions in case he didn't get here, which was if you just replace the word interests with responsibilities and priorities. That was his suggestion.
I don't think that
he thinks the he thinks
Sure.
the responsibilities and priorities of the planning board include the townwide master plan. I think that was where he was going.
You got exercised over this particular sentence.
Yeah.
Okay, so the interests after planning boards.
So right. So let's say, so I guess right now it says one appointment will be a current planning board member selected by the planning board to represent the planning board's interests, and then it goes on. I think what he's suggesting is that it would say selected by the planning board to represent the planning board's responsibilities and priorities. That was his suggestion.
Yeah, that seems like it would work.
He kept referring to interest as almost like.
Yeah, he doesn't like the word interest.
Monetary interest.
Right.
So
interest, and he said he didn't know what the limitations meant.
So his suggestion, because now I guess I am speaking for Gus, was to represent the planning board's responsibilities and priorities, period. That's his suggestion. He does have one question that I honestly just read that I have this question too, now that he's asked it, which, so this precludes employees of the town, and it does in both places. So, and then maybe this is a question for you, Mark. So if it excludes town employees, he says, that obviously in his mind makes it so you don't have to say the Board of Selectmen don't have to be on it because they are town employees, because they can't be on it anyway.
They're elected. They're not employees.
to get $900.
So the idea
get
about
paid.
this employee, well, town administrators on it.
Non-voting.
But not
they're
voting.
non-voting.
Planning board does not get paid, in case anyone was wondering.
Yes, oh, believe me, I looked to see if the warrant committee got paid, and I know we don't. But his question actually went on beyond that. He was wondering, what if the people you wanted to nominate, like what if Scott or the school committee wanted to nominate maybe a longtime resident who sometimes is a substitute teacher, or what about a resident that maybe is an on-call firefighter? Are those people not allowed?
This is
I thought
like,
it was a good point too. I didn't think about that.
I was gonna say, this is totally off the top of my head to that point. And we did discuss as a group, people felt that there was a conflict of interest with having a town employee who wasn't also a resident. So we talked about, what if you're a town employee and a resident? That's a little grayer than what if you're a town employee but not a resident. I guess you can't really be on this as a non-resident. But anyways, what if you made it like a full-time employee?
That's what I was just gonna ask. What if it says a full-time employee, and then it would allow somebody like this to be on it? I don't
I
know.
think the committee would just have to look at that and talk about it.
Yeah,
And think about that in terms of.
Are you suggesting as a
I'm not really suggesting anything.
prohibiting them from being simply a voting member, or they can't serve at all?
Well, I think that's a question, right? Like, so would they have to be like, I'm just saying, so what if you have somebody that is a longtime resident of the town, maybe is very active in different things, and maybe at one point in their life was an architect or worked on a school building committee, but in their retirement is substitute teaching. Does that preclude them? Yes.
Wouldn't you be able to find enough members of the committee to not have to worry about reaching out to that segment of our population?
Unlikely.
The concern I have is back to the point I made initially, which is the MSBA regs specifically list a number of frankly highly paid full-time municipal employees that they recommend beyond a school building committee.
Right.
Your school administrator, your principals, school facilities people, a whole list of people.
Right.
As non-voting members.
They don't care whether they're voting.
They don't care if they're voting
They
or
don't
not.
want to say on, yeah.
No, but what Sharon is saying that, but there might be some people in the population that happen to be a part-timer.
Mm.
Should the appointing authorities be allowed to look at those people as well, and we've excluded them?
Well, then,
As
the
voting
the
members.
flip side is you've got to be very specific, because the law, actually, state law defines employees in the ethics law, and it's a very, very broad definition. It's full and part-time, compensated or uncompensated. So inadvertently, you could
So
be
technically,
precluding a whole bunch of people.
Right,
Right.
right, and
That's
that's
been
it's
my-
intended to. And my question is, are we hurting ourselves in limiting our pool of applicants by excluding that segment? I suggest not. I suggest there's enough people out there that we can find that we don't need to worry about missing out on those individuals.
But Mark, what you're saying is that virtually every person in this room right now, being on a committee, is a special employee of the town of Medfield. I am considered a special employee of the town of Medfield, as is every other, as are the selectmen, as are the warrant committee, as is, the entire school committee. So we have to find a different way to define that, because the word employee is so broad legally.
Under the ethics rules, yeah.
Under the ethics
But
rules.
isn't it just you're concerned about resident versus non-resident?
Yeah.
No, we were concerned about.
Well, this
person
particular
work-
question from Gus was about what if somebody was a substitute teacher or an on-call firefighter? That was the question he was
Our
tossing. out
concern
there.
was to have a paid employee as a resident of town. Should they be as a voting member of the school building committee? And we were suggesting, no, they shouldn't be, because it's like a conflict of interest a little bit.
What's the conflict there?
Being an employee and that they're getting the benefit of the school project.
And
But wait,
maybe
if you
the
listen to
supervisor
Mark's-
or the
if you
town
li-
administrator or superintendent.
Right,
Right,
so like
because the state wants them
substitute
there.
teacher
Yeah.
is very different to me than the volunteer fire, just for the one thing. A substitute teacher, I wouldn't want on the committee because they work for the superintendent.
Yeah.
So they're not gonna be,
But as
it'd be
a-
hard to be an independent voice when the
Right.
boss is sitting in the room. And we were looking for independent voices in terms of the voting. So I think, I do think we'll have to look at that piece. So Mark, I just want to clarify, you are saying that a warrant committee member on that committee would be considered an employee? And
I'm saying in the absence of you providing the definition by default, there is a definition of municipal employee in state law. And it's in the ethics law and it's extremely broad. And
Okay,
it's gonna preclude almost everybody.
Everybody in
And
this
just,
room.
oh, why,
So-
just,
but just gonna say, Mark, so you could help us in defining it, if we wanted to go that road, if the committee chose to go that road.
you gotta look at this realistically and common sense wise. In all due respect, I've been involved in a bunch of public construction projects, including schools. The last one we had, the one we had in Franklin when I first got there, half the building committee were parents of kids. And they were there because their kids either were in the school or going to go to the school, and they certainly had an interest. But that's just the nature of things. It's the same way as the Ethics Commission itself finally recognized that the majority of people serving on school committees are there because their kids are in the schools. Originally, that was a conflict of interest. So you have to be realistic. Most everybody has some kind of an interest. It's just a matter of how high is the degree and what's the real risk that it's going to impair or conflict with the public interest.
Could you add something after, so where it just says shall be Medfield residents, and shall not be employees of the town of Medfield, can you just add a qualifier that says unless specifically, oh, I'm sorry, I'm on, SBC composition, .1B, where it says voting members.
P1B, the introductory
Thank
part
you.
after voting members, right?
Yeah, right, yes, that's where I am. And so it, right now it says all voting members of the SBC or any subcommittee established thereunder shall be Medfield residents and shall not be employees of the town of Medfield. Can we just add like a comma? Unless specifically required in the sub paragraphs, like, because like that way you could have a warrant committee member as a employee, but they're
Full-time
allowed.
compensated if you want.
Well, they, okay, that would be fine too.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, if, like, is there some way to just,
Full-time compensated employee.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That does that.
But a 0.8, I mean, that you start to kind of go down that slippery.
Yeah,
I think it's really just about letting, because you've got other committee members on here. And so if you've got school committee members and you've got warrant committee members and planning board members that are on here, if we're gonna get defined by ethics as employees, then we need some kind of qualifier that allows those committee members to be in here. That's all that I'm trying
Right,
to
I'm
get
wondering
to.
maybe what we need is a clause that.
That allows these
that says-
specific ones.
Yeah,
That's.
right. So,
That's where I was
not
going.
Not employees excluding.
Excluding
warrant
these
committee,
specific,
Planning committee.
right, I was
planning
trying to basically be like,
Right,
you know, excluding these ones that we've chosen.
yes.
That's kind of what I was
Right.
trying to
Maybe
say.
except as provided below.
That's
Yes,
what, that's what
right.
I was, that's where I was
In
going.
conjunction with
Yeah.
not being full-time compensated employees, in conjunction with the two of those.
Right,
Yeah, yeah. I think both of them do what you want, right? But then it,
It takes the confusion out of the word employee.
right, yes, we don't want. to confuse.
and then Russ, what did you say? Except as provided
Except as
below?
provided below.
I'm doing a track changes thing that I can send you guys after, if that's helpful, because I see everybody with their phones.
Oh, that's great.
Sharon, could you go back though to the school committee and so Cynthia Green? And the Board of Selectmen appointment. I think we should continue to have the interest of the townwide master plan in here, because the townwide master plan covered 9 different areas of historic conservation, a whole bunch of things that are embodied by putting those words here.
What,
And I
what,
think it's important that it's included. That was an effort done townwide that the town was fully involved in. The planning board has responsibility for it. If it's not listed here, then we don't have the perspective of making sure that those items are considered.
But isn't that the planning board's interest too?
But that's the planning board, but the rest of the town may not be aware of that. I think we had a lot of conversation about this and made sure that we had this in here to make sure that perspective was covered, and we received comments about it. So I think it's important to keep that in there, and I don't think it hurts it at all. To your point, yes, that is the responsibility of the planning board, but it makes it more specific so the rest of the town knows what they're doing.
what if instead of it saying, so what if it, after it, selected by the planning board to represent the planning boards, instead of interest, it says responsibilities, and priorities, including, that's what I was gonna say, and then you take out that without limitation to
Yeah,
thing,
I
right?
don't have a problem with that. It's just, I don't want to take out townwide master plan.
And then it
Gus
just,
last night was fixating on the word interest.
Yeah.
he was, and it, so that takes
Take that
interest
out.
out of here with priorities, including the townwide master plan, and then we don't even have to say interest of the townwide master plan, we just say including the townwide master plan.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Now I have to figure out how to strike something.
We've kind of agreed that we're okay with planning, permanent building committee member being appointed
No, we
from the.
can't really
selectmen.
agree because we're not,
Yeah.
we have Bob, we have our.
We have everybody there. We'll take down all the
We've
comments
heard
that are
everything.
made.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so we're not agreeing to anything.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not.
Sharon, are there others? Are there others to? or other members of the warrant committee?
I was gonna say, does anybody else have any? Those were mine.
Yeah, I think we covered all the questions. Oh, I did have one question that we hadn't talked about. There was no mention in the bylaw on the appointment of the SPC chair.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that's because you assume that that would be the responsibility of the newly formed committee.
Yes.
That none of the appointing authorities would decide. who that chair
Exactly.
is.
The
Okay.
committee gets together, I mean, they may want co-chairs or a
Yeah.
chair and a vice chair.
Yeah.
It's a big job, so we thought, let them meet.
Yeah.
Let them introduce each other, talk, and then,
Yeah.
you know, maybe they'll
I think that's the
do
right way.
co-chairs 1 year, co-chairs the second year, change it up, whatever works for the committee once they're together.
Okay.
Yeah, we did discuss that one
Okay.
for a bit about, yes, we did, yeah.
It, for me, was the number. I appreciate it. You had 3 appointed authorities and you're trying to give equal say to each of those,
Yes.
but you end up with an even number on the committee. And if you're subject to some sort of vote and you need to make a decision, you get a tie vote.
Well,
we
in here we have it, it's what, two-thirds is required.
Yeah,
2/3 for all decisions.
yes.
Yeah,
That's how we were okay with the even number. It's 8 people have to say yes versus whatever the decision is before.
I mean, if you do.
7 for a quorum,
Yeah.
8 for the vote.
If you do change, you know, I know you're gonna.
If we
consider-
change to 13, it would need to
13,
be
you have to change
9.
Change the numbers.
Yeah.
So one suggestion that was in this email that Gus had sent me, which I think that we could probably take the numbers out and just say, because and the only reason I'm saying that is because, like, what if the MSBA says that you have to add, I don't know, 4 more people?
But there was an addition that.
Yeah,
Mark
that's
asked.
Mark's paragraph.
No, but when you get down to the numbers, so if we go down to the section that's procedural requirements, you have a minimum of 7 voting members, and then it says you have to have 8 of 12. What if it just is a majority of the voting members in the first one, because that's your quorum? And then the other one, it just says 2/3, like maybe you don't have to call out the numbers. And the only reason I'm saying that is like, what if something happens and the MSBA makes you put 3 more people on it, your numbers don't
Maybe
match?
just say 2/3.
Just say 2/3 and take
Not
the,
8 of 12. Yes.
Right, because if you just say
We did
2/3, and if you just say majority,
And I did appreciate you doing that.
Yeah.
no, and I love the math, but,
Well, I assume they can figure out the half person.
right, so in the procedural requirements, it will just say, right now it says a minimum of 7, it just says, it would just say a minimum of a majority of the voting members, like to get your quorum.
Yes.
And then in B, it said all actions will be 2/3 and then just take the numbers out.
That makes sense.
Yes, Scott, you've been very quiet.
Well, I take a much more optimistic view of this whole process than I've heard from others accolades. Some of the acrimony was kind of bouncing around because I thought, considering what we're talking about, and there's 5 things that were brought up, 5, having to do with the permanent building committee member, right? So we kind of, the question of the 65, the age issue, dealing with the minutes, the issues that, which are really operational issues in some ways anyway, in some way, and then planning board question, and then this last, so I mean, I think we are there, as between the interest of that the committee put together to what they needed to do quickly was to get something in this book that got out to the town. This is the warrant is the warning, the notice to the town that we are going to be talking about this topic. And I have no question. Sometimes I have to, Mark has to do this as well. You have to, are we in the bounds of what went out? We're so far in the bounds. I mean, we're talking about.
We're not
so
changing.
So mapping a process from now to the town meeting, because we're talking about voting on something that is not the article as printed. Right, so that's the easiest thing to be able to do is when you have a motion is to be able to refer to the article as printed. But we know that the article as printed is subject to amendment. And this is what we're talking about on the way up. And these are articles, but they are the warning. But we vote on motions, and so it's not uncommon that that a motion could be amended. So I think now for mapping out the process from now to Monday. We have to figure out, you have a draft, Sharon, if you could, one more time, there's gonna be a vote, because we're not gonna be negotiating all of these points on the town meeting floor. We're gonna have something printed in advance that would be distributed to everybody coming to the meeting. And we would be substituting, essentially the motion would reflect that. That's where I wanna be by Monday.
I get where you want to be. I'm just having, I'm having difficult, I get totally.
Of where you want to, and you guys
Well,
can't meet. Yeah.
If we can't meet, can you post for a Saturday meeting?
I just asked her that earlier.
Oh, because I am not,
I do not have, I won't be able to have staff support for you to do a Zoom meeting on Saturday, so we'll have to talk about that.
That's okay. That's okay.
So
can we meet in person?
You
or that's
could,
close?
depending how complex this is or not, you could still have a motion as printed in the warrant with the following exception.
Right.
And then just list those changes, which I didn't take to be that extensive.
Right.
My problem is that our committee needs time to meet. We gotta go through all those pieces and then agree, and you can't do that at Monday at 6 o'clock. I'm not comfortable with that. I think that's pressuring people to vote on something in an hour in front of the town. And in my many years on the school committee, I was adamant about you listen and you vote on a different time. You don't vote then. You vote at a different time. So I think that it makes more sense if you could
So
do it on Saturday.
your
and-
committee has actually done what they were mandated to do and fulfilled it by getting this product printed in the warrant. Now, you're free at this point to go ahead and have a meeting and make a recommendation, but you don't have to. This thing is now essentially assumed a life of its own. Once it got printed in the warrant, it's open for amendment. So
Right.
I mean,
don't feel that you have to be necessarily get this approved and be the proponent. You can just be kind of along for the ride or not.
what I was gonna suggest is that, so we haven't even voted on the article as written yet. So we still have to do that. Okay, so I'm just gonna assume that if we're not unanimous, we're split. And so at some point, we're gonna have a majority and minority report. And then I think that either the majority or the minority of the warrant committee could choose as their report to make a motion for an amendment. And so we could make the amendment. You guys as a committee or as individuals would support it or not. But I don't think the amendment has to come from you in the time, that's,
Right.
because somebody could stand up on the floor and amend it.
Yes, understood, totally understood. I suggest in fairness to the group.
Well, I want your committee to meet. I'm not trying to advocate
Yeah,
on.
You know, and I am fussing with the idea that we were gonna have town meeting in June. It's not that far away, and that we could not do it, maybe rewrite it. Maybe there would be more wordsmithing, maybe not. And then bring it to June. I don't know. This is-
Probably, but not guaranteed.
There may not be.
It may not be a meeting. yeah.
Oh, it's not guaranteed.
You may want to stay for the second half. of this meeting. Have I absolutely-
It seems like there's-
Can I jump in really quickly? Can I
Yeah,
make a
yeah.
Go ahead,
point?
Sarah.
So
Sarah.
one question, Christine, is do we, I think the answer is no, but I'm confirming. Do we require town support for a Zoom meeting? I can host and run a Zoom meeting.
That's fine.
Because we could have a meeting on Saturday if we had a quorum of people. And then we could, I have been also preparing a red line as we've been talking. I think Sharon, it will match yours, except to the extent I have a few provisions highlighted because we need to talk as a committee about whether we agree about the 13th member and the changes that flow from that. Most of the other changes I think are drafting. And then the 65 person.
Yeah.
So we could, I can email that to the committee tonight. We could meet on Saturday on Zoom. I could run the meeting and then we could print those on Monday. That does leave the issue of, I don't know where the warrant committee would be with its recommendation because you wouldn't know what our final motion would look like. Because I can't tell you right now how the committee as a whole feels about the 13th member and the 65.
Can I just ask, like,
If we did that with Sarah, because Sarah does amazing in the real time, fixing of things, it's just absolutely amazing. If we did that on Saturday, and got it to you at your meeting on Monday, because you are meeting on Monday, you said.
We meet at 6 o'clock on Monday. Yeah.
You could then vote, you would have a chance to have seen it, right? And then you.
I don't have a problem with that because I think what we have to do, and I want to give Amanda a chance to talk because I think she was trying to, was that like we have to vote on what's printed first, the way that it is, just because we need to do that. And then however our vote comes out, then we can have a secondary discussion about whether or not the group likes these amendments or not as a secondary discussion, if we want that to be part of our report.
Amendment reflecting what their Saturday meeting.
I mean, I'm okay with, you know, sort of voting on something now, as long as we have an understanding that what this committee is gonna do on Saturday won't go past what we've talked about today. In other words,
You don't have, at this point, you don't have anything from them.
Well, that's what I'm worried about.
No, we really only have our suggestion. Like we could vote on our suggestion, which I think we probably should vote on our suggestion.
Okay.
And if it gets changed, then we have to vote again. Right?
So we vote on what's printed in the warrant and then.
I think we have to vote on what's
But
printed in
you're
the
not gonna
warrant.
come up with a new issue that we haven't talked about tonight.
Well, who knows? They haven't
Mark,
met.
do I understand that our job is over as a committee, and now we're just town residents appearing at the town meeting and even talking on Saturday?
No, we're still constituted. We're still constituted through town meeting at least, right, Scott?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Right, but you fulfilled your charge in getting a proposed bylaw amendment submitted, which is included in the warrant. So that's.
And we're not charged to go to the town meeting to present it, and we can talk on our own without being violating.
You are still a committee.
There's no requirement that the sponsor would.
You were there, all of a sudden I figured out where you were going with that.
So it could come from.
The amendment could come from us.
If this was the way they do it between the House and Senate, they sit down at a felt line table and they have a conference between the House and Senate, they do it, but that would be, this could be done in a half an hour. So I think if we could do it that way, Sharon and Gus on one side, representing, and you guys could, and you guys sitting here, I think we would be very close enough that hopefully people would, shave off the edges to have one amended article to come before the town. What I want to just avoid though is that you guys produce an amendment to the article as it appears. And then you don't agree with it and you have to amend that amendment.
I personally would not support a tremendous amount of confusion.
Right. No, that's what that would be the likely.
What I'm getting from all of this is that everybody wants something. I don't think we're materially disagreeing.
You could either start with a motion to pass as printed in the warrant, and then with the understanding that there would immediately be an amendment offered. Alternatively, the main motion could be, instead, what I said earlier, printed in the warrant with the following amendments or exceptions, and put it as part of the main motion on the floor. And that's at least the two options that occur to me.
I'm going out as committee chair with a bang. Look at all these problems. Yeah, I like that one.
And that way we don't have to dismiss it, right?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who's going to produce the document that incorporates the changes that we're?
I have it already done. I already have it done.
Okay, so you can share that with us.
I will send it.
And if we like it unedited, we would go with that.
Sarah.
If
Sarah has it.
Sharon and Sarah, I think I'm pretty much in agreement.
Yeah, and they can just.
My question, I guess procedurally, my question is, I think 75% of it is drafting, not substantive. I think we probably wrote down the same words, Sharon, and have that's all done. The question I have is, when we go back, if we have a meeting on Saturday of the bylaw committee and we can't reach consensus within our committee that we agree to add the 13th member or to drop the 65-year-old participant over 65, then, but the warrant committee were to decide by a majority that you want that, then who's bringing forward which amendment? That's where I think the rub is. I don't know how either one of those entities will come out on those two questions. I'm just seeing that they might not be the same place. And then I'm not sure where that leaves us procedurally.
Just on one little point on, I don't think we're saying to drop the 65 altogether, right? I think there's
My version here has the 65 changing to someone appointed by the council.
By the council on aging, right?
And right now we're coming with the point of 65, and so we're going to have to. I think it's probably going to be an issue with us.
Yeah, because we mentioned
because
earlier,
you've talked about it.
we talked about that one, and we felt that's not a big enough representative of that part of the community of 65.
And is that because you think that they would pick somebody that just is active at the council on aging rather than going out to the entire town?
That's
what
I'm just saying, I don't know they had the outreach for the whole community.
Might encourage enrollment. They need people now.
I don't know if they have a newsletter that goes out to everybody at a certain age. I just don't know they have that reach, and that's what we talked about.
Is somebody from that constituency actually going to be the right person?
Right. And I don't like it inside if the moderator, maybe upon the recommendation of the Council of Aging, but it's not a moderator's appointment anymore if it's somebody chosen by the Council of Aging. Why don't you just say the moderator appoints 3, the Council of Aging appoints 1? Because otherwise.
And we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Didn't we talk about language about like all demographics so that it covers that without actually saying.
That got rejected.
All some.
By us. Well, because we didn't think that was a good definitive.
It kind of being
item that could really be really addressed. I mean, all constituents. Well, that's just everybody in town.
Yeah.
And we don't want that. We want it to, we really care about that particular group, that they get represented and that they get a vote.
Right.
And they get to participate and argue, discuss. And I think that part of the community feels that they have not had that. Ever.
To be clear, my suggestion on the Council on Aging was not to undo that.
Isn't that the job of the
That was my-
moderator?
that was my argument.
Yeah.
That was my
The
argument.
school committee, we're making appointments.
Yeah.
So going back to the procedural question, again, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but the history of the town, the moderator has been to go to the Warrant Committee for a positive motion.
Yes.
Now, if they don't have a positive motion, then you go to the sponsor or proponent for a positive motion. So that's procedure what it's been. The only twist here is, can that positive motion be something other than as printed in the warrant? Certainly with the consent of the drafting or the initiating committee, I don't see an issue. And frankly, I don't see a limitation if you want to proceed in that way anyway.
Either way, I don't need it.
So just,
And so,
yeah, so where are, so.
So where are we?
My question on that.
Okay, so can I ask a question of Mark? So hypothetically, if a positive motion came out of the warrant committee for this particular warrant, then who would do the amendment? Where would the amendment come from?
You need to put a main motion on the floor. It doesn't necessarily have to start with as printed in the warrant. You can start with a motion that's already a variant as the main motion.
You can.
Okay,
The warrant committee can, or
we can do that. then.
We could.
While the warrant committee makes the motion, that's just been the practice.
all right.
Now, could we, I'm just trying to think about, within that motion, normally, if you were to do that, you'd read the entire motion. And you know how long this article would be.
I like to talk.
I've never done it. Could we make reference to a document that's been distributed to all the members of the town meeting?
No, because it's not in the
So
warrant.
I think you would, but I think what Mark said earlier is you could say, you could read the motion as printed in the warrant,
Right.
except for the following
Right.
change.
Okay, well, that's what I
That
think we
would-
have
that
to
would
do.
limit-
Hypothetically, the
reading.
law is, again, as you said, it's notice.
Okay.
And this is actually some of the case law judgment considered. The notice was, okay, I'm a potential town meeting attendee, but I'm not a very good one. So I looked at the warrant and I don't see anything that really disturbs me, so I'm not gonna bother to go. But if I had seen this other, that might have changed my
Yeah.
inclination.
Yeah.
So that's why you can only relate, refer to the warrant as printed in, not something that was handed out that night at town meeting.
Well, and I think we could make slides.
Yeah, but I think it's also not that hard based on those 5 or 6 categories.
No, it's
Identify those
not that hard
exceptions
to make
as printed in the
those
warrant,
things.
except for, yeah.
And the other thing is you've got the whole, I think the whole bylaw printed here, it's not.
It is. So
can-
you could
can
say
zero in on
subsection,
the
whatever,
school
go
building
there.
portion of it.
Yeah. Okay,
So the positive motion would be, if we get there, that would be the article as printed in the warrant, except for the following changes to it. And that would be the positive motion. That positive motion, if it was, if it's agreed to, it's gonna be supported by the committee,
Right,
right?
so.
And that could
If
be
it's-
supported by handouts just to explain to people
Right,
and try to
And by
minimize the
slides.
confusion.
we can do that.
So I already have to update your motion books.
listen, it's okay. It's Mathers.
Watch, you don't even know what you're gonna
No,
do.
it's Jeremy's. Ah, it's Jeremy's.
So, Steph, can we have like a conversation amongst the warrant committee? 'Cause
Yes.
I'd like to-
I would too.
There's two items that are now. I know nothing is agreed to, but there are two issues that seem to be sitting there, right?
Mhm.
One is the 13th member being specifically from the permanent building committee. And the second being this reference to 65 or older.
Mhm.
I personally, being 65 plus a good amount, have no problem overall with the 65.
Yeah.
If that's a big issue and it's been discussed, I don't want you to have to go replowing that field. And it
I
seems
agree
as
with
though-
you, Bob. I'm not 65 or over, but I agree.
But you will be, God
Issue
bless
with that
you.
language.
But, you know, so I agree, so I think that the idea is that it's been expressed that this has been, you're concerned about it. And it's been, without asking you to vote, and it's been, and you have gone over it, and I think that, you know, it's almost semantics at this point. I think the judgment of the people who make the appointment, there were a number of people over 65 in the last building committee, so and there's people over 65 who are involved in the town, so I don't see, personally, I'm just speaking for myself, I don't see that as an issue. I do feel, and I don't know what the prior conversations have been, that a member of the permanent building committee as a link to the town view, strategy, involvement, showing the link of the town and schools is important, and I would like to have that input.
I agree, and I guess I would say is if they didn't want it to be 13, as long as it was one of the 12. I could live with that. I don't think it has to be. The only reason I was suggesting it would be a 13th was because I was trying to not really mess with what they did. You know, because they had said they wanted these things, but I wanted it to make it clear that they really need to pick somebody from that committee because there has to be a link between them. So I care more that there's somebody on that committee, whether or not it's one of the 4 or it's one of 5. I could care less on that.
And I would agree with both of those comments. The one I feel the strongest about is the permanent planning building committee. I believe that the prior project did not fail because of the qualifications of that committee of the SBC. They were impeccable, the qualifications of the people on that committee. It was around process, right? So, and a school building is a long project. It takes 5 years at the least. And there's a lot of real detailed technical decisions that need to be made. I think having that person on this committee is really important. Having somebody from the permanent planning building committee on this committee is important.
Yeah.
I'm not as stuck on the number 13 or 12 either.
Yeah.
That's not important to me. And on the 65, I think, I'm personally fine with, I understand the reason why they want that particular demographic represented. So that doesn't bother me either.
The 65 only bothers me because I feel like you can't say that, but if Mark has told us 12 times over that you can say that, then I guess I have to let that go. But I mean, really, that's my issue with it. Is
Does it set precedent though for other committees? Like that's.
I kind of want to be like, how many SBCs out there have a number in it like that?
That's
Like,
my only concern. Is
I
that
don't
it's
know.
set
I feel like it's a
precedent for other
confusion.
town committees.
How many
It's-
bylaws get this specific about a committee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's
That's-
different
that's-
there.
that's-
I'm fine with the number being in there.
But I think the point on the demographic of over 65 is a good point.
Yeah. I
Sorry. I'm sorry.
So,
I was speaking.
Bob was just, go ahead.
oh yeah. I was
I'm
just-
sorry, no, I was speaking. I'm just waiting for you to stop talking so we could continue.
Oh,
Thank you. What I said was, having been on 2 school projects, it's the reality of the vote that it's very important to designate participation and accountability of that demographic in this committee.
Is that demographic more important than any other demographic?
No, but it's more,
That's what you're
it's
saying.
as, no, that's not what I'm saying, I'm sorry, I mean, I'll clarify that.
Practicality.
What I'm saying is from a practical perspective, documenting accountability of a group that has historically felt excluded, in my judgment and experience, is very important. It's not at the expense of any other of the 11 or 12. But identification, that's been a problem. And I think it's been addressed. And I think
I
it's good.
accept your explanation, and it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I understand that too.
Just say the moderator must appoint someone from his tennis group.
What about if?
Somebody else here.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask one question? You're, or am I in the middle of your deliberating more? I just want to, just to make sure I understood. So we didn't list the permanent planning committee member, but we assume that, as we mentioned, that the select board would choose someone. What you're saying is that.
We want you to make them do it.
You do want us to make.
Make them do at
Yeah.
least one.
Because you heard Gus talk about
Discretion.
being unhappy with us.
That's why I made it be 5. I was trying to-
That's why it's.
Make the moderator do it then. He's always amenable to it.
Well,
We could
By the way, make it a lot easier. Give one,
Horse
somebody from the
trading.
permanent building, somebody from the council agent. I don't want to be scouring around.
Yeah, well,
It does not have to be the select people.
no, no.
We can scoop, we can give it to the moderator.
Yeah, quite
No
frankly, the
offense,
only
David.
reason why I tossed it in there was because the Board of Selectmen picks that committee and I was just, and maybe if
Okay,
Gus had
that's
5, he'd be
fine.
happier because then he's more important.
So that's why I just wanted to make sure that you understood that we weren't excluding them, we just figured.
I 100% get that. I 100%
You
get that.
want it spelled out.
I want there to be at least one.
That it be spelled.
A
out,
requirement,
okay.
And I don't, and again, I only added it to 13 because I wasn't trying to mess with everything else you did.
Right.
But if you would rather have it be 12 and just have one of those 12 be a person, I'm totally cool with that.
So like we're doing a planning board member being appointed by the select board, you're suggesting it could be also a member of the permanent building committee.
Right, and then they get
required to be
2.
Appointed to that, and then 2 more.
Yes.
So the permanent planning building committee would pick someone.
Yes,
As opposed to.
That's right.
Yeah, because they gotta
just
ask,
like the planning
Yeah.
board process.
Yes.
Same with all the others, yeah.
Because somebody might not be interested.
well,
Yeah.
there's only, what, 7 of them, right?
After.
I think there's only 5.
Five?
I think there's only 5 on that committee.
So then the
So if
other,
there's only 5, and if they have any other project, I mean, we're asking an exorbitant amount of times.
I know,
That's
but,
only our piece.
That's what they said that for. I feel like Paul needs to be there.
In all due respect, I think 12 is already pushing the
Well, so have it be 12. like-
unwieldiness. The higher these committees get, the more unworkable they become.
Right, it's not just 12, it's 12 plus 3 non-voting.
Non-voting.
and
No,
maybe
absolutely,
4
yeah.
non-voting,
Yeah, so maybe just keep it. at 12.
So maybe keep it at 12. I think that the argument is more that one of those 3 that have that kind of description that you made.
Yeah.
Be from that committee.
so I'm suggesting, without speaking on behalf of the whole committee, pretty close.
Yeah.
Are we
It sounds-
even at the 65 page? Almost like a consensus there, do I get?
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with
Yeah,
that.
I'm okay with 65.
I just don't want to set precedent with other.
I still have an issue with it, but it's not, it's not worth holding up the rest of the.
So the
I'm okay
point
with
being,
it.
if you get to the point of selling this to the public for purposes of financing, the issue always arises in these projects, particularly school projects, that there was a lot of money wasted and it's a quote unquote Taj Mahal. We've all heard it. So you need somebody that has cred, part of their group that can get up and say, no, I've been along and this is bare bones. And I've been in there advocating to keep the cost to a minimum and they've done a good job. They've done that.
But somebody with a school-age child could do that too.
Well, and
They
they will,
don't.
yeah, they will, but it's
Okay.
just representation of a group that is.
I completely get it. I completely
Yeah,
get it.
It's
no,
very
no,
practical.
without
It's a
it,
practical
I get it
issue,
with the
really.
optics of the town. I
Yeah.
completely get it. I
To
get it.
my point.
And
No,
it's-
it's valid.
It's paying attention to reality.
Absolutely.
That.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
definitely.
I completely agree. It's just, I think I'm with Sharon, it's just saying it in the manner of it has to be a certain age demographic, went right back to her.
It
point.
irks me.
It's saying, like, what happens if you get a 63-year-old with the same, it's that exact same thing, that's where it just, it's,
Well, with
It's
any
stating it-
satisfaction, COA actually has a definition where I forget what I think it's actually 60, not
50.
65. There's an age where you have a right to go to the senior center and then it can be lower than that. So, but there is an age number in there for COA the right to participate in COAs.
Are we,
But
okay, well, I guess I just have a general question, and I know you can't answer because you're not voting. But when we had, so we had talked about this whole, part of the ones with Gus that I had said we should use the should endeavor to be, because that was at the
And I
top.
think that's
What if in the 65, instead of it says one appointment will be, it says should endeavor to be, and then that way,
There you
if
go.
they like someone that's 64, it's okay.
I like that.
I like it.
I love it.
I don't know.
You're the other one that said, I don't know.
There's only so many of those should endeavors that I can live with.
It's only the second one.
No, honestly, with that bylaw, you want to be specific because we want to stop the problems that we've had in the past. That was the whole purpose of our being.
Yeah.
And you start watering it down, and that's not,
So
I'm not for
would you guys like 60 better than 65?
that. No, the reason I like 65 again is that's the retirement age, and that's the group we're looking at.
I don't think the number, I don't.
It's not the
think-
number,
I mean,
okay, just-
No,
just
it's the
checking.
idea that there's a piece of the population.
Yeah.
That does not have kids in school,
Right.
right, that are on a fixed income.
Yeah.
You know, and they need to have representation, because to the point that was made, I want them to be accountable, which was what Mark said.
Yeah.
I want
that's
them
right. That's what we
bullshit to
want to.
stop.
Right.
I'm at 72 and I voted yes, okay? And I'm gonna drop off a tax bill on Monday that says, I don't wanna pay anymore. So let's get somebody on that.
Are you gonna write that on the
and start
tag in your
talking.
memo line? Are you gonna write that in your memo line on your
Have a
check?
coffee when you do that?
Yeah, go
So
ahead,
with
Matt.
the process being, we're gonna have our Saturday meeting, we're gonna mull over this stuff, hopefully we'll be in agreement with what you're suggesting. We'll get our report to you, to somebody here, who would that go to?
To share.
To Sharon. And.
Still the boss.
As soon as
Until
we-
Monday.
And then I guess you'll have an idea of whether or not we're gonna be in agreement on Monday.
Well, so I mean, I guess the question to this committee is, or does it matter that we do it at 6, or do I need to ask people if they want to do a 5-minute Zoom meeting on Saturday after they meet? I can run it
I think it
myself.
depends on if we're kind of in agreement on the Saturday meeting and we get it over to you, when you see it, you'll see if we're on the right page, and then it's a 5-minute.
You can
Do it on Sunday.
distribute to us.
I can send it all to you, and then we're gonna have to vote on it in advance on Monday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Just send it.
And
You get it to Sharon, she
So
can
John, what
distribute
is
it.
the motion on Monday?
Is your,
And you
We
would
won't discuss
be
it.
sharing that at town meeting. You would
Yes.
say, as printed in there with these
If all of
amendments.
us or the majority of us and the majority of you agree on that would be,
Right.
this would be the change
what we
motion,
give
then we
to
will
you.
make that, yes.
And in the interest of time, of open meeting, we don't, you send it to us, but we don't discuss it.
No,
till
you
our
have a
open
chance to
session
read
on
it in
Monday.
advance so that, and then we can post it as part of our agenda so that the townspeople. can
But
see it too.
non-discussion, so there's no violation of open.
You're
meeting.
not gonna
No discussion.
reply, no
Oh,
discussion.
believe me.
No back and forth.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll
just
just
wanna
send
be
it to
clear,
you and we'll
we'll be clear.
have, Nick will add it to the agenda packet for Monday, so it will be posted. We could do that.
I guess you'll decide if you think there needs to be a 5-minute Zoom or whatever amongst us, is that what?
Well, we would have to
You have to
decide now,
post
so it
it.
would have to be
Yeah, post
posted.
it.
Okay.
If we are assuming that
So if we post-
the planning, that whatever they come up with is not grotesquely different than we're all talking about, we can probably get away with this on Monday.
Or you could post it, and then if we don't meet.
We could post it and not use it
Cancel.
and cancel it.
Well, that might be good. Then we'll finish. And Sarah, you with me that you can have it and print it, and finish.
What
So
if
can
we?
send it to you Saturday?
Well, I was
and
gonna say,
you
what
can
if we
decide.
just cross post as the same meeting? And then if anybody wants to pop in to see their meeting, because if we have a quorum that pop into their Zoom meeting, we're gonna need to be posted anyway. Just cross post us with Sarah.
What time are we doing this, Sarah?
What time?
Let's see. Making the decision on behalf of our committee, who's half of whom are not here. I vote for noon.
Okay, I have a 1:30 appointment, so it'd have to be done by one.
Oh, I hope this is like a 10-minute, 15-minute meeting.
Can we go to 11?
Doesn't sound like it.
I can't do, I need to be at my computer to host this Zoom, and I can't be there before 11:30.
Deal.
Let's do 11:30, right?
And just cross post us for 11:30 in case the majority shows up.
And actually,
Yeah.
Christine, you can create the Zoom. Can you create the Zoom link and then I can start it, or do I need to have it come from my Zoom?
I'm happy to use my Zoom too.
You're a webinar and she might be just a Zoom. Are you a webinar owner?
Because like I have limitations on how many people I can have in my Zoom account.
I have a key too, I could just sit here.
I'll figure out the logistics.
Or do you want to just do it in person?
But does it have to be a public meeting that people can join?
It has to
in?
be a public.
Yeah, that's the issue.
I would prefer that you have the Zoom option for people who can participate, particularly where you're doing a Saturday meeting. We try to avoid Saturday meetings because people have so many other things going on. You don't anticipate a weekend meeting. You don't normally do that. I would prefer that it stay on Zoom. And I will work out the logistics with Nick and Brittany tomorrow.
Because if you need me to take this computer home, or if you want me to come use my key and I'll sit here and trash the town hall on Saturday.
Chocolate all over the.
I'll bring the chocolate.
Maybe some wine bottles too, that's.
We'll figure out the logistics.
Okay, all right. So, so not to muddy the waters. We also have Article 20. And Chris has the amendment that she has, but so I guess maybe before that, maybe we should just vote on 14.
As
Do we-
written.
As written.
But so yes, let's vote on 14 as currently written in the warrants. Is there a motion? It could be positive or negative. I move that we dismiss Article 14 as written in the warrant.
Second.
Okay, so we have to go around.
I will vote affirmative on that as long as we're gonna have a follow-up motion to put a positive motion on it for us.
I have a second motion coming.
I
I agree.
Yes, I agree.
Yes.
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 Amanda?
Agree to dismiss.
Okay, all right. So I guess how do we word this next motion? I guess I move to recommend an amended motion as discussed and described in this that I will post later. Do you want me to read through them? Do we need to do that? Recap?
Just cover the major points.
Okay, I'll cover the major points. Okay, so in the voting members, it now qualifies employees as full-time employees and then adds except as provided below in order to include the committee members. I guess I'm asking as part of my motion, are we suggesting this should endeavor to on the 65 or are we leaving that? I'll redo my motion after I ask that question.
I suggest we leave it that.
Suggest to leave it as it, okay, all right, so we are going to, we are leaving the 65 as is. And then we are changing the Board of Selectmen's 4 appointees to have one of them be the permanent planning and building committee member.
Sharon, thank you.
Yes,
Could you just broaden that to that there is a permanent building committee member in one of the groups?
oh, sure, yes. Then that way you guys can move them around. Okay, so we are suggesting that a permanent planning building committee member be one of the 12.
Thank you.
Okay. For the planning board member, we are changing the sentence to say one appointment will be a current planning board member selected by the planning board to represent the planning board's responsibilities and priorities, including the townwide master plan. Okay. And then sorry.
Since this is going forward, it kind of caught me off guard in the first place, so I apologize. My suggestion would be that you rescind your prior motion and you make a motion that you would approve it as printed in the warrant, provided that the following changes are made.
Okay.
It's positive with the changes rather than really
So it's
negative.
not a
way.
dismissal.
Yes, it's not.
Okay.
Not a dismissal. That's-
So I think we need to vote to rescind our last vote.
Yeah.
I move that we.
Okay.
I move that we rescind the first vote we just made.
Okay.
Second.
You have to go around.
Yes.
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 Okay, Amanda.
Yes.
Okay, we're starting over. Okay, so now we are making a motion to approve with the following,
Provided the following changes.
provided the following changes are made.
Approve the article.
Sharon.
As written with
Yeah.
the
I don't wanna-
certificate of warrant.
I don't want to interrupt your deliberations, but just wanted to ask a clarifying point before you vote. On the
Yeah.
full-time employees thing where you said full-time and except as provided below, I think that's a disconnect because the people that you're saying except below aren't full-time employees. So I thought you needed one or the other, not
That's a
both.
good point.
So I think
point.
full-time comma compensated employees means you don't need the except as provided
Yeah,
below.
provided below.
Yeah, I think that's
All right, that's fine.
And then
Okay.
one more thing, I'm sorry, on the
Go ahead.
last point that I think Carolyn, maybe you brought up, are we saying one of the 12 would be a permanent building committee member or the select board will pick the permanent building committee member?
I think we were leaving that up to your discussion on Saturday.
And then
Yeah.
you will all re-vote after we decide?
We are just saying we would like you to amend it that one of the 12 be a member of the PBC.
But you're agnostic as to where it comes from?
That,
Right.
that is, yes,
Okay,
that is
Thank you.
correct, okay? All right,
So I move that we approve the warrant as printed in the article. With the,
Move the article is printed in the warrant.
move the article as printed in the warrant with the following amendments that Sharon did.
okay, so I'm gonna start with the voting members. The employees will be qualified as full-time compensated. We are requesting that one of the 12 be a current permanent planning and building committee member. For the planning board, we are changing the sentence to say selected by the planning board to represent the planning board's responsibilities and priorities, including the townwide master plan. In the next one, it will say 3 appointments should endeavor to instead of will be, so it matches what is at the top of this. And then down in procedural requirements, we had made the suggestion that the numbers not be used and in a minimum of 7, it just be a majority of, and in a minimum of 2/3, it just says that without the numbers. That was a suggestion. And then under C, where it says the town of Medfield shall provide a clerk, we would strike the parentheses portion as to it being funded by the school department budget and leave that silent and instead add if necessary after clerk in case there is an OPM involved. And then in the last sentence, it would request that it be posted on the school department and town's website.
Second.
Okay. Shall we vote?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Amanda?
Yes. Reluctantly.
Yeah,
on the
I kind of wanted to have
65,
something we
but
were unanimous on, but okay. All right, okay, so that is Article 14. Thank you, and it's not tomorrow yet, but we're not done yet, because Article 20, Chris shared a, sorry? Okay, so Chris shared her proposed amendment that is, Chris, do you want to explain it, or I'm just going to try to?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just adding, because this, the bylaw committee was not charged
really with making any changes to permanent planning building committee existing bylaw. It was really just to add the school component. Really as a petitioner, it was really my responsibility to provide the wording to change that portion of the bylaw. So what I was suggesting was basically mirroring the language that this committee came up with to insert a new section N that is basically the same thing, but just refers to as the permanent planning building committee shall hold periodic public hearings to solicit town residents' feedback about a town project, addressing town project schedule, scope, and estimated cost range, including without limitation, one public hearing focused on site selection in any case for the town project is to be located on the new site prior to finalizing the site selection. So this is basically the exact same wording.
So do we need, so if this language gets incorporated into
14, then we don't
14,
have
do
to.
we need to vote on this?
Yes,
Okay,
because the language at the present time is included under the school building committee. And you need it for the general permanent planning and building committee.
right, but I'm saying if it gets added to Article
I guess our
14,
question is,
amendment,
can that committee can we add this to the amendment and just do the one, or do we need to keep them separate?
No, you have to keep, in
You
my
change
the
opinion, you
article.
have to keep it separate. He can take them up, and I believe that Scott's gonna link them, but
Okay,
they need to be separate.
But if this passes at town meeting, Article 14, then we don't need the Article 20?
no, we would need Article 20
And in
to
fact,
put
if
this
14
portion in.
fails, you could still pass 20.
Right, we
If
still
you're
put it
independent.
in.
Okay,
So the 20 for the permanent.
20 is just for,
Not-
right,
Section, so 20 is only dealing with section N of the bylaw,
so it's
Right.
which only deals with permanent building committee.
that's correct.
Our article doesn't deal with that section
That's right.
N at all. So she's looking just to change section N, so they're totally independent of each other.
Right.
I see.
She wants to insert an N and then renumber after. It's basically what the
No,
motion.
she wants to
And
change
it's
it.
there, you can just
She wants to
change it.
She wants to just change it.
So
No, she noted to be numbering, but the town clerk, it's a separate bylaw we passed a couple of years ago. It gives the town clerk the authority to renumber as needed.
Oh, okay,
So
fine.
how will
I didn't
this,
worry about that.
how will this wording get presented when the motion is made by Chris?
If we support it, we would make the motion.
Okay,
If we do not support it, then Chris would make the motion.
okay. Well,
It's part of Article 20.
This is Article
Not
20,
14.
right?
Article 20,
20.
yeah. So I mean, I see no issue with this personally.
I don't have an issue with it.
I'm good too.
Okay.
So I move that we recommend passage of Article 20. That's presented to us.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Jeremy?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and Amanda?
Yes.
Okay, so Chris will make your motion for you. Okay, all right. Okay, and you've been very nicely waiting. Would we like to talk about the hospital?
Okay. Poor
Okay.
God.
I know.
We're supposed to talk to you an hour ago, right?
Got 4 Zoom calls today, I gotta go over.
Are we done with this?
Yes, we are done with this. We are gonna
Thank you
talk about
all.
the hospital for a few minutes and then call it a night. How's that?
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Sarah, I'll send you what I have and you can compare.
Great, thank you, Sharon.
Okay.
Thank you guys for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
for all the work
Thank
that
you.
you've done.
Thanks for all the work.
Thank you for all the work.
More in particular, thank you for inviting us.
You're very welcome. I'm very glad you came and I think this was productive and hopefully.
very well.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
thank you. I feel like we actually worked.
Yes.
Yeah. you-
Might be coach or something.
Mather.
Hi.
Nice, the chocolate.
Yeah, who needs a chocolate?
I ate mine already.
Send it back around.
Oh, thanks.
So welcome.
Thank you very much.
So we hear that you're gonna give us an update about all the fun things hospital last.
I wasn't sure exactly what you had in mind. I mean, I can tell you
where we're at on the development committee, we just met earlier this evening.
I think that would be great.
We get this handout on the due diligence process.
Oh, yeah, we did have little handouts that are sitting here. I think that, oh, we haven't done those reserve fund transfers. We have to remember to do that too. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, we haven't been focusing on the hospital because we've been focusing on town meeting. And if there is a possibility that this town meeting is gonna happen in a month, that we thought that maybe we should get an idea of what we should be paying attention to.
Okay. So, you know, generally where we are, the Board of Selectmen entered into a provisional designation agreement with Trinity Financial at the end of, towards the end of March. And that opened a formal period of due diligence for Trinity, leading up to town meeting date. So they have, you see sort of the left-hand side of the page, the first three columns are taken straight from that provisional designation agreement with the town, as far as Trinity's activities during the due diligence period. What you see in the center column and over is how the development committee and other committees in town propose to evaluate that information, you know, all prior to town meeting. So we had a call with Trinity this morning. They are on track to deliver most of the materials at the end of next week. And some of these are kind of refresh and some of them are new, but I think all in keeping of, you know, what our expectations have been throughout the 3 years that we've been working on this. So we have reached out to various committees in town. I think many committees are waiting for the information in order to schedule meetings, but we want to make ourselves available as a development committee to attend meetings, make sure we're answering people's questions, committee members' questions, and getting information to you and to others, you know, as needed, so you can complete any evaluation that you're planning to complete before a special town meeting would occur.
What's the proposed development again? How many units?
It's up to 334, right? Which is at the top end of the range that was in the town's master plan.
And it would be like a mix of like townhouse units and.
It's rentals.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So big, so how many buildings?
Well, so the proposal is that Trinity would use federal and state historic tax credits and renovate all but 2 of the existing buildings, you know, convert them from what they are today to apartments. And when I say 2, you know, there are 2 buildings that are leased to the Cultural Alliance. So excluding those, because they were not part of the RFP that we published.
Is there any new construction or?
There's no new construction.
No add to what's there structurally?
Not at the current time, that's right. So.
I saw the reuse. I didn't know if there was adds to the buildings.
Right, I mean, I think if in the future, I mean, it will depend on what the town approves, but the Trinity's not proposing that. I think anything that would be proposed, they would have to square it with the National Park Service and Mass Historic because of the use of historic credits.
Right.
But the number of units is capped.
What is the bedroom counts for the units? Was there a mix somewhere? I didn't see.
There's a mix. It's from studios to 3s, and it is not final. So
on that point on the bedroom units, they came in with a lot of 1-bedroom units, as I understand, compared to sort of what the preferred option was when they did the zoning. But based on some discussions I sort of heard from the school committee, as part of the fiscal impact analysis, they're looking at the impact on the schools, right? The number of additional storage. So there's some rule, I'm not sure what it's called, but there's some rule that says when you do a development like this, you have to have so many 3-bedrooms. And I think it's like around, you know, the calculation, the percentage, whatever it comes out to, about like 230.
well, it's 10%.
10%, okay. So 33%. The proposal Trinity had, I think was like 8 or 11.
Right, so Trinity does not believe that the buildings, as they're constructed, will accommodate a large number of 3-bedroom units, just in terms of where load-bearing walls are. If you think about the use of the buildings before, now you're adding bathrooms and things like that. So a couple of things. So the policy is a state interagency policy. So the state housing agencies have this, I call it more of a guideline. And even it's 2 pages, and within the 2 pages, there are numerous exceptions. Trinity on other projects where it's done historic rehab has been granted waivers to do a smaller number of large bedrooms. So they would need to have, the state would need to support their program.
Right.
Got to be approved.
In other words, that checkpoint of them agreeing to that with Trinity. It's somewhere down the line, right?
Most likely.
I know Trinity says they have a good track record of doing that and all that, but there's some uncertainty there, I guess, right? I don't know how much it is, but that as to whether they will actually, be able to do what they think they can do. If for some reason the state, pushes back and says, no, we want more, maybe not 33, but we want more. So are you considering any type of contingency? Like, are they considering that when they do the fiscal impact analysis?
Yes.
Okay.
So what we discussed with the superintendent and one member of the school committee was to look at the numbers if that policy were made to apply, and to look at it in terms of what Trinity had originally proposed. Now, I think the newer information will be, as part of their due diligence, they've had a firm come in and basically do dimensions of all the existing buildings. And they're anticipating by the end of next week, they'll have that information, and that will help them sort of feel more confident in terms of how many units could really get in there. One other point I would make is their proposal was to acquire the entire property, and the selectmen have decided to keep the Arboretum area out. So when they proposed 334 units, it included 17 apartments in the cottages, the wood frame cottages, as opposed to the brick buildings. So, whether they could do 334 units in the brick buildings remains to be seen.
So when will they have that revised sort of split between how many units they want and how many 1-bedrooms?
I believe by the end of next week.
Next week.
And that'll include the impact on the schools. Numbers.
Well, they will then give that information to their fiscal impact consultant, who will update his report, right? And that will be
So
shared.
the schools will then get a guesstimate of
Right.
how many students they're gonna.
Right, so when they did their proposal in August, it was 8 3-bedrooms off the top of my head, but you have to also put that in the context of the development committee not, in the town, not providing access to the site. Prior to the proposals, we were concerned that when we did the site walk, we had representatives of about 20 developers up there, and we thought we can't have everybody calling the superintendent or the town hall, and just realistically, you're not going to go into 26 buildings. You're not going to be able to show multiple groups all those buildings. So the decision was made to defer it. So that's part of the reason that, it may not even, they may come back next week with numbers that are adjusted from their proposal, still assuming a waiver, but not the same exact mix.
Yeah.
So in your judgment, from your experience and knowledge, their report coming up in the 1st of May. And there's been some discussion about a special town meeting in the June timeframe. I think Trinity kind of using that as they're pegging it around too, right? In terms of, because of costs and everything else that goes in. Can you give a perspective on what you think you anticipate where the hot buttons are going to be, and is that time frame realistic? Because that's one of the things from our perspective here, is that if this is likely to be a special town meeting in June, we got some work to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, and it's for you too, I understand that, but I mean, I think that's probably my biggest concern is what's the likelihood that we're working towards a June date? And then in that case, what are the areas that you need us as a warrant committee to be participating in?
Well, I would think it would be mostly around assessing potential areas of cost to the town, which as a development committee, we think are few, but there are some. And the net revenues that, you know, the money's generated from taxes on the property's never been on the tax roll, so start paying taxes and then, you know, so you have a gross number and then you have a net number by subtracting out impact on schools primarily.
They'll give the detail of that net 700,000.
Well, they have it now.
Yeah, but it's all being
Yeah,
updated.
Updated, yeah.
But it's, you know, it's not the proposal is that Trinity, all the infrastructure costs would be included in the project. Right? So there's no ask, there's no appropriation, there's no override, it's not that kind of an ask at town meeting. It's.
What will we actually be voting on, Jim?
Yeah, that's my question. So what are we actually, like, what is the vote?
So it's municipally owned property
Mhm.
and the selectmen cannot dispose, sell or lease municipal property without a 2/3 vote at town meeting.
Got it.
So they are proposing, and sort of where the provisional agreement takes you is, you know, as the developer, they want to know that the people of the town support the project before they, you know, they've already spent hundreds of thousands, they're going to have to spend a lot more on architectural drawings and things like that, and they want to know that people in town support the project.
So we're voting, so they're submitting all this documentation, it becomes public record, anybody can go in there and look and review it, which is for a developer to do that is kind of amazing, because it just kind of reveals everything. And then we're basically voting, and the town is voting on that comprehensive package, yay or nay.
We'd actually be voting to authorize the select board to enter into an agreement or dispose of the property.
Yeah, the land disposition.
But based on these proposals, based on what has been submitted by Trinity, yeah.
Correct, so there would be a land disposition agreement
Okay.
that the selectmen would have prior to special town meeting.
The way what I learned about this is that right now they're in the due diligence phase.
Right.
And as they get closer, past, you know, they do a lot of due diligence.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're negotiating with the town at the same time.
Yep.
The final terms of an LDA.
Mhm.
That LDA is agreed upon. It's signed and held.
Which we have.
Held
We've
in
already- yes,
escrow, held in
absolutely.
escrow.
But we've read that.
So then the town meeting happens.
Mhm.
And we vote to approve the selectmen to, you know, basically release that agreement from escrow and execute it, you know, so to follow it.
Okay.
The land disposition. So.
Right, and then that then takes you into permitting,
Yep.
things of that nature, so.
And then it's done after that. From
But that's the
town's
vote.
perspective,
That's the vote.
That's the
That's the vote, okay.
Right, but the LDA would require them to develop the project that, you know, is
That
a
they
proposal
specify.
that's been modified, if it's modified by the land disposition agreement. So it's not unconditional vote to transfer this land to Trinity, and then they, you know, they can do whatever, or they can propose changes, and it would be pretty locked in.
No, I mean, I've read the LDA and I attended the information session. I'm thinking town perspective, looking at this. I'm a town person going to this vote and going, all right, what's this information in front of me and what am I saying yes or no to, you know, and also trying to judge in my own brain.
Is there a draft
Type of person that's
LDA
gonna
now
go
at this point?
I believe the draft LDA will go to the selectmen probably by the end of this week or first by next week. So it's been draft, there's a special counsel has been assisting, the development committee has been working on the draft.
Okay.
And the idea would be, it would be reviewed by the selectmen before it went to Trinity for review. And then I imagine it'd be some
And
period.
at what point would they make it public to?
Towards
the end,
We're
yeah,
still-
towards the
I
end,
think
right?
we're still working on, you know, obviously before town meeting, but we're still looking at the timing of that.
And will that have an impact on the timing of the town meeting?
I think the selectmen are committed. I don't want to speak for them, but I believe they have spoken publicly that they would like to have the LDA negotiated. So that was available before town meeting.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
We, from experience, before town meeting, timing.
Well, hopefully not at 2 hours.
Is a very contentious issue.
I don't know what you're talking about. Annual town meeting is like a month from now.
No, I don't mean, yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, if it's just given the week before, people have said that's not enough time to look at it. I just don't
And there's
know what
other
that.
information as well. I mean, this due diligence table is great. It really outlines a bunch of things, including the column as for the town's peer review consultants. And there's a number of deliverables there that your committee are anticipating receipt of that may be of interest to this committee as well. So understanding some of those time frames when those things may be available would be helpful for our work.
And the purpose of my question is, I want it to pass. If all things are, follow the process as they are. And one of the risks of public acceptance is we didn't get time to read it, and that's what I'm trying to do.
I mean, you already heard some of that. That's your information.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the complaints. It's like, this isn't enough time.
Right.
We need more time.
Well, that was exactly my question. Is there enough time? And this due diligence just started, what, 2 weeks ago? And do you think you have enough time? And is this the typical length of time that due diligence is performed? Or is this being rushed?
No, I would say it's typical. First of all, so I work in commercial real estate and,
Okay.
Sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 60 days, it could be longer, it's whatever.
Sometimes a week,
But I think you have to put it in the context of, the RFP went out in April. First of all, Trinity, I think, has been paying attention to this property for 10 years, but setting that aside. The RFP was published in April of 21. The proposals were due in August. They were designated as the most advantageous by the selectmen in November. And then the provisional designation agreement was signed in April. So were they allowed to have people on the site measuring buildings, taking, samples? No, but they've lined everybody up. This is their core business. There are a lot of things behind the scenes that they could be doing. Yeah. So
If they've raised any,
I'm just gonna say, just from a trying to be practical. I know your 3-month assignment is about 7 years old.
I said 6 months and 3 years.
For people to say to you, they say this is too fast, okay? I totally understand that, and prior experience, is all this has been available, this is where we are, this has gone through. From a practical manner, and really, I guess it's really from your judgment for professional Trinity, is risking the vote if there's a perception that it was rushed. What's the risk if you said, okay, we don't want to risk the vote because we saw it in the school, we didn't get enough information, what have you, we could have done it differently. Do you have a sense on that, or is this June? I know the select, it's been expressed what the selectmen want, but
yeah, well,
what's the risk of not doing it in June or doing it in a little bit later with more public time?
Well, what do you mean by later? It would probably be September, October, something
Yeah.
like
Oh,
that.
so
So then-
September.
Yeah,
let's say
okay, so then you're talking 10 months after Trinity was designated by the selectmen, we're gonna put it to a vote in the town, and I think the concern from the developer is
No, that's
how
what I'm
serious
asking.
is the town? They have other projects, like any developer, they have a pipeline project, so I would say the conversations have all been very constructive and not threatening, however, they're trying to assess how real this project is with the town.
Right, but if you say to Trinity, look, this is the reality of to my perspective, in your explanation earlier is that Trinity is very experienced in this.
Correct.
And that's why they're the winner and they're the chosen one. You said when you had 20 going through the site and you said we talked earlier. I was led to believe that most of them walked away because they were like, we can't compete with Trinity.
Well, some of them certainly did, and I think others, there were a variety of different reasons that people didn't.
But I'm saying if you say to Trinity, look, we're in, we gotta get this done, we just need the time, and I understand it's 10 months later, but it's actually 3 months later from what they started. would that be a deal breaker?
I'm concerned that it would be, right? We're in a rising interest rate environment, we're in a rising
Yeah.
construction cost environment. What will we be studying between now and September, October? And I don't mean that as a.
It wouldn't be studying it, it would be,
We just-
public information. It would- my
Yeah, it would be
experience,
getting
it's
the results of the peer review consultant.
giving people more time to
Those
digest.
documents out there. And so the public see it.
The risk is on Trinity. I
I'm
mean,
sorry?
the risk is on Trinity, you know, I mean, if to give them more time. I mean, it's.
Well, the risk,
The town is
from
transferring risk.
the risk on us
I
is
agree.
that it won't pass.
I agree with you.
And we've
100%.
seen that with
It's a
the school,
two-thirds
because we need more
But
information,
it's-
and I'm just trying to balance the two.
So I wanted to be at the annual town meeting. And, Nick Milano was very clear that, that wasn't gonna be entertained.
Yeah.
You might have heard that from somebody.
Yeah.
So
mean, June-
the warrants were written.
The June timeframe seems tight, but is there something that we could? We did a lot of education with the school projects, and is there something that we could be doing to facilitate more public availability of information, I guess, as it comes in, to help with that June timeframe? I think if you even, you can't go into the summer because nobody stays in the during the summer, like it's not gonna work. So you're right, I do think your next one is September, but
I noticed the date you picked is the last day of school.
I didn't pick any date.
the lady in the back.
Yeah. We picked that day, we were looking at June, the town hall is closed on the 20th, so that's why we were looking at the 21st. When we were talking about that date, conceptually, the last day of school was, I believe, the week before. That's since changed, so Nick and I had a meeting today about whether or not we would move that to the 22nd, because I know people like to go out and celebrate at the last day of school.
Or drive down to their cave house that day right from the school.
It might be gone.
It might be gone.
So that's also a thing. So we're gonna talk to Jeff tomorrow and we're gonna talk to him, but we cannot have it on the 20th because it's a holiday.
Okay.
It's a holiday.
It's
Oh, it's- yeah, that's right.
Juneteenth is observed that day.
So
So
I-
when does Trinity's due diligence period expire?
It technically leads all the way up through town meeting, but we're
Okay.
expecting their materials and, much of it at the end of next week and then the following week.
So then
And
in
then-
terms of like what I see as a difficulty of that site is the infrastructure, are they planning on putting in like a wastewater treatment plan, or what are they doing for sewer? Have they disclosed what they're doing in terms of utility connections, water, sewer?
Connecting to the public sewer system.
Is it as far as the public
There's
sewer?
been some previous analysis done on the capacity in the wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah,
And the pipes leading towards. So there's a connection point that the development would have. and
okay.
There's some areas where they need to upsize the pipe for capacity, but there was analysis, a lot of that preliminary analysis was done prior.
Right, so the committee had commissioned an analysis which indicated that there was sufficient capacity, and Trinity, they're not relying on that, they're doing their
Sure.
own, we'll have theirs peer reviewed. And, those consultants have already been retained, so it's,
Almost you only have three looks at it, the preliminary look, the development look, and then the peer review look.
Yeah.
I think you have to go forward, John. I hear what you're saying, make a good point, but I think you have to go forward. I think the worst that happens is it fails, and then you have to do it again in September. And because you need to have
Well, you
more
may
public
have a developer
information.
in September, but I mean,
Sure, I
because
know,
I think
that's why-
development's risk
Right,
is-
right.
is
So
the
they wanna get-
September.
You gotta try for June.
Well, I'm just saying that's coming across as being very clear, and that meets the urgency of this and the urgency of communication. Now, and in some ways, we can learn from the past experiences that it's to assume nothing, that any publication has been disclosed. I think you can't over communicate. We did, for example, with the question that just came from Christine on some of this infrastructure work. If it's been done, get it out there.
Yeah, the
Yeah, I was gonna
transparency
say.
is key.
Those
Like,
are
it's
the kinds
just-
of things that I
You don't want these
would
questions
recommend.
coming up at town meeting.
right, no, understood. So, a question I would have for you, just in terms of, suggestions or advice, so that, those studies are posted, right? And there's a town website that contains all kinds of information about the hospital, that has those studies, all the environmental reports that have been done over the years.
So I
So
mean,
beyond that, because
yeah,
people don't necessarily go and seek it out, right? And
You're preaching to the choir. All I'm saying is that you're gonna find, you know, we have a public hearing that's coming up in the bylaws, right? And as a matter of fact, 5 people show up to public hearings, right? So it's a great concept and nobody comes, right? So the idea is we just, I'm just saying, over communicate, you know?
Yeah.
It's all out there, then send out a little note saying, this is where it is, and just.
Is
Trinity gonna help with some of this?
yes, no, they're doing, so a few meetings have been scheduled. So on May 18th, they're doing 2 sessions. One is just for seniors at the Council of Aging. That'll be at 11 o'clock in the morning. And then that same day, I think also at the Council of Aging, but a general public meeting would be held, I believe at 7 p.m. on that evening. They'll also do a meeting in June. Location hasn't been determined, and they will also, just depending on the timing of town meeting, be available, you know, sort of here at the town hall, like the Saturday before type of thing.
Can they do a presentation at town meeting, Scott? Would that be possible when you have like town meeting members there and just do like a brief little presentation that, oh, you know, we're not at this town meeting, but we're gonna be calling a special town meeting in June. This is what the project is, this is what the vote's gonna be on, so that at least people who are at town meeting can see.
Or maybe an information table or something.
Yeah.
I think something was approved.
Yeah,
right?
we've had handouts that were tables and set up the handouts.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or
Either
should
that
they use
or a mailing directly to everybody. With a synopsis.
After annual town meeting and.
Yeah.
Follow-up mailing 2 weeks or a week before to everybody with the synopsis. Because it'll answer a lot of questions up front.
Your.
Dude, it's only Monday.
I know.
What's the matter?
I was gonna ask.
Getting something out printing is.
No, I think it's, but I think the idea, I think the concept of, all I can say is over communicate and assume nobody knows anything. Because most don't. And they won't take up the interest until the week before, and they're gonna say, where'd this come from? So we've done it.
And I think that is also a concern if we did the meeting in the fall, right? It's not that people are gonna look at it for 5 months.
No,
It's human nature, right? You wait until, you know.
how you feel.
Yeah, well, and I guess kind of like to Christine's point, and not to try to add something to town meeting at the moment, but like you have like, we're gonna have at least a thing to do a slide in the back. I mean, I know we're not doing all the things, but like, what if while people were arriving, there was just a slide that had the web address?
Yeah, putting together
Like,
slides
go here.
right now for the-
Yes.
Web address, I'd be reluctant to put the date up there until.
No, I'm just saying, like basically, don't forget there's a hospital project web
Yeah,
address.
just
Like
let
that's,
people know
that's all
where-
I'm suggesting.
I'm happy to announce that. to have-
Yeah.
have
Just do a
it
quick
clear,
plug.
that,
Yeah.
you know, pay attention. kind
Just
of-
plugs, yeah, just
exactly.
plugs.
I think
And I
Coming
think it's-
down.
Did you know this is where we are? This
Yeah.
is coming.
And honestly,
That
I
makes
think
sense.
it's important
Yeah,
for Trinity to be, you know, holding these forums because they want to control the narrative. They want to control what this development project will be out like, rather than all the chatter in the town saying, oh, it's this, you know, and then it kind of like balloons into something that you can't pull back anymore. So Trinity is very active, or the development, you know, whoever it is, the team is active in controlling the narrative that they want to project to the town, that this is what the project is, these are the benefits, then that's better for the project.
I can't
People
tell
will
you,
make it up if you don't. put it
I
up.
can't tell you, I can't tell you how many people I talked to that the whole parcel's going.
Yes.
Like they were just.
Yeah, they
think
just
the
don't
whole
understand.
thing,
Yeah,
you know.
they need to know the facts.
It's all great feedback. I anticipate their meetings on the 18th, they're really their meetings, right? So we'll be there as a development committee, but it's really their meeting. They'll have the architect, they'll have their design people, they'll probably have their traffic, you know,
Yeah.
to answer those questions. And I heard tonight that they're planning to have some element of interactive sort of polling of people at the meeting. I'm not quite sure on what, maybe, you know, sort of different ideas, and including people that are participating by Zoom. So I think, you know, they obviously they want to get the project approved. They are very experienced with this kind of project. They know people are going to have concerns that need to be addressed, and I think they also just genuinely want the feedback.
Well, I will say to you that in the public hearing that you had, in the initial presentation, I thought was outstanding. And answered a lot of questions that I had, and it was done with clarity, and you did it very efficiently. I know you get 4 days, but I would say that, to my opinion, that public hearings get, 5 people. But the town meeting is gonna have people coming through. If, you could do something to a side room or something where you got the work already set up, and you got the charts to the question.
Or even the hallways. Or
Yeah, well,
walking
the
into
idea is
gym.
because you had that chart that showed what it was gonna be.
Yeah, that's
And you have the work done, and you're gonna get the audience that day. You're gonna get many more people than you'll ever get at a public hearing.
Yeah.
Coming through from the town hall. You can grab 10% of them. You're gonna get people who are active, who can help participate. That kind of like.
I mean, there's a balance you have to play between, educating on the history of what's happened up there versus what's coming up and what people have to focus on, why this is a good deal, being crisp around that messaging and why this is a good deal for the town. So I agree, Bob.
And I think that this town meeting, relative to some that we've had in the past, should be much more efficient in terms of getting things done. So you might have a window there too. But again, I don't know how you do logistically, but to have something, because they get the big hall and what have you.
Yeah,
or,
okay. No, that's- Really good feedback.
Can I ask you a question? Are there any issues that Trinity's raised to you from their due diligence on some of the environmental issues that the testing they've been doing? Anything that's come up that you could share?
Nothing formally. I will say, I think the reality of the amount of remediation that needs to be done is, I've said before, I think with their experience, they can kind of just look at a building, kind of when it was built, kind of give you a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Well, one of the gentlemen had said to me that, some of the materials maybe hadn't been as contained within the buildings as, they might have expected. So, but we haven't seen a report on that.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say it's anecdotal.
Yeah.
But that number may be bigger than, what they had initially budgeted. One of their major concerns in the proposal also was about the gun range that's off on 27, but there's been some really productive meetings, including with the state official who has oversight of that property, and there seems to be a willingness among all parties to
makes
see
it
that we
work.
can figure it out.
Yeah.
So I think that was originally kind of their biggest concern.
Yeah.
I think they're surprised more people in town aren't concerned about it, but I think right now.
People I talked to don't even know there's a gun range over there.
They're used to it.
Or nobody lives there.
Right, behind my house, nothing happens. We've
Oh, I
tried.
know.
I don't know who they're talking to, but I want their number.
Have you found during COVID, it's used more frequently and it's louder? Because that's.
Well, it's the
I hear the one.
machine guns. I won't say, it's the rapid fire. It sounds like World War III sometimes. It's unbelievable. You can't.
I hear that.
The only thing that is, it must be expensive because it never lasts long. The ammunition must be expensive.
Yeah.
You can be out there and you go, oh my goodness, duck. But it'll be over in 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
They're just good shots.
Yeah.
Alrighty
Well,
then.
they fire towards Walpole, so I'm okay.
That's what he said, yeah, there's a different one, yes.
So, I mean, I appreciate you guys have annual town meeting, you've done a lot of work, and now, there's this, so I would just say again, like, on behalf of the committee, we want to make this as straightforward and make sure we're getting you the information that you need when you need it.
Jeremy will be in touch.
I was gonna say Sharon introduced us to the new chairman, right?
Awesome.
My
Thank you.
suggestion is that we try to leverage as much of what you're doing. Piggyback on your own efforts on due diligence so that we don't have to recreate. Seems to make sense to me. I don't think any of us has a desire recreate what we did for the school.
No,
Well, again, the proposal is that infrastructure is included as a project cost, so there would be things the town would need to do as far as being the technical applicant for a MassWorks grant. But it's all intended to be project costs, so
Yeah.
if you set that to the side, what are the other impacts, positive and negative on the town?
Pretty much the fiscal impact.
It seems like it, but I mean.
Don't underestimate traffic.
Mhm.
So all the traffic studies.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, that's gonna be a big issue.
yeah, probably.
But they're gonna have studies to.
There-
Yeah, there's a
right.
traffic
Yeah.
study.
That's right, and it'll be peer reviewed, and I think probably everybody has opinions about traffic, but it's hard to know how accurate any of those studies.
Well, we have lots of traffic.
Everybody's got an
experts
opinion about everything.
around.
Everyone who sits in it, right?
That's right. That's right. Awesome. Well, thank
Down on
you.
Harding Street, I don't know what opinion.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Happy to come back anytime.
In
She
the-
said she's turned into a pumpkin tonight. I don't
Well, I
I
know,
don't wanna know
we
what
have
happened to you
6 minutes
yet.
left and Christina's gonna kill me if we don't do these reserve fund transfers. So
Oh, thanks, but I'll have to get back.
there were, so there's 2 reserve fund transfers that were on the table. Thank
Oh, I
you.
work for Joe. You too.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so apparently we have a reserve fund transfer because the special town meeting was $4,500 too expensive and we needed tires on a fire truck for $8,500. That sum it up?
That sums it up.
Is 8,500 all tires or is that some anticipated cost too? Sounds like $1,000 in tires, but there's also other.
That's a tire.
Yeah.
Well, they're for a fire
I mean,
truck.
You don't want to flat tire.
Yeah, there you go.
I want to know how often do they use it?
Dude, I wanna go home.
I use the fire insurance
Motion
all the
to-
time.
Why do we even talk?
It's
How
almost,
far do they really have to go, right?
it's almost 10 o'clock and I'm scared.
My drink is empty.
The 8,500 for the tires, if you remember, this came up at the capital budget thing, and we asked that Chief Carricker wait till the end of the year and take this out of his budget. So that's why.
So
Okay,
this was a previous capital request.
but we didn't want the fire truck to have tires. I don't totally remember this.
We didn't want the fire truck to wait until July, but we didn't want it to wait till next year. We thought the fire truck, if it needed tires, should have tires.
Can't say not available.
That's all.
Yeah, that's good judgment.
Correct. So,
Okay, all right. And then the second was you spent too much money last year on our fancy TV, so $4,500.
to start with, yep,
Okay.
yep. I'll be coming back for some warrant reports and some
Okay.
time reports.
Is this 4,500? Oh, it's for our prior.
It's for the special town meeting and to cover, this is just the salary piece of it, so it'll cover the special town meeting salaries, and then we anticipate, obviously, we're gonna need to have people there on Monday.
I'm just teasing.
So we'll see that. And then
Yes.
June,
And then,
most likely.
and then June, and then we'll talk about more about the warrant reports.
That's why it has no reserve.
For those of us that received color copies.
Yes.
That was.
You know, I gotta go home and check mine and see what.
It's like a lottery.
Get a color one?
Did you get a color one? I know, I flipped it up and I was like, whoa.
I'm missing one of the
That was,
items.
that's a reserve fund transfer.
So,
Screaming.
we ordered them all in color, and then they called us the day they were supposed to be delivered to say that the color machine broke. And we can either print a third of them in black and white or wait 3 days to get them. And we needed them that day. So third of our residents got black and white.
Oh,
That's
boy.
Black and white.
Are
All
we
right.
supposed to do anything with this?
Yeah, so I'm going to motion to approve the $4,500 and the $8,500, the 2 reserve fund transfer requests as printed.
Second.
All in favor? Well, actually, we have to go around because Amanda's
Yes.
sitting at home.
Yes.
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 Dude, yes.
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 Amanda, if you're still awake, you want to vote?
I'm awake, yes.
Okay, and now Bob can make his motion.
Motion to leave.
Second.
Go to bed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
Amanda, are you good?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, my hair. Okay, all right.
I guess I could say.
My goodness. All right, thank you, everybody.